the $300,000 grant that was received. So that makes up the entire million of the project. So that placeholder was not here the last time we talked. But to kind of balance things out a little bit and also reflect some additional work that needs to be done, some research, let's put it this way, is if you turn to page 4, which is the 2019-20, so next year's year after next projects. We moved the West Sunnyside drainage project from the current year to next, partially to recognize the fact that we had more of a borrowing for Hudson View Park, which is much more ready to go. But the West Sunnyside drainage project, one of the things that came up is looking at ways that West Sunnyside can accommodate pedestrians better than it does. So it's not just the drainage project, but also the possibility of widening a little bit.
Suspension bridge?
Well, yeah, I can't, I mean, again, we're pushing it out of here because we have some research to do, but the prior project only really reflected the necessary drainage work that needed to be done. But I think it makes sense to explore whether the roadway / pedestrian area can be widened enough to accommodate pedestrians. There's no place for anyone to walk. I mean, you can picture it.
To get to the aqueduct or to go further?
Yeah, it's a link that's potentially part of the Riverwalk, to be honest with you, to get people from the county Riverwalk property to the aqueduct.
So not to go to Sunnyside though?
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
I mean,
That's the entire link.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be more towards the upper area.
I mean, you could say, Mark, that, for a long time, if you were gonna walk to Sunnyside, you said, oh, let's visit Sunnyside, you would end up having to go down West Sunnyside Lane without a sidewalk. So I guess you could say it's always been an issue because pedestrians are around there.
Right.
Yeah, but this might be another motivation because of the possibility of Riverwalk.
Well, I just want to point out, just the cost to get a sidewalk to the aqueduct and the cost to get it down to, you're probably talking about tripling the budget to get it down to
This is
Sunnyside.
very fluid.
This number of 275 include an increased amount given it was going to be more from where it was moved originally?
Yes. So, but it basically may not be enough.
Right.
We have to look at it. Again,
But it's a higher number than
Yes.
when it was in the
the
budget
for
for
the last iterations. Yep. I think it was 175 last time, so we put a little cushion in there. But again, we're pushing it out a year, so we won't have any fine-tuned numbers on that, but it's a placeholder. And so anyway, we kind of did a little swap there, putting in the Hudson View Park money in the current year, which is obviously much more ready to go. Beyond that, I have the only other placeholder here, full disclosure, is the firehouse roof. We're working right now through the process of having consultants look at exactly where we are and how we can get to where we need to go. We did recover money from, the full amount of the bond from, we're still getting a handle on what the cost is going to be to complete. So this is really a placeholder. We'll borrow what we need, but this is just at least to give us more than what we hope we need. So that's basically it. I don't mind. I wasn't going to go item by item, so we did a bunch of this at the last June work session. So, but I don't mind answering a few of the questions here.
I'm going to go through them and then say, they make a general statement. This is from Ann Jaffe, Holmes, J. Wilson, and Leola Speck, and GPTF. So every capital purchase of the village should be made according to the best practices for municipal operations in regard to sustainability. Purchases should be durable, fuel efficient, adaptable to multi-use and changing needs, and be able to respond. So I think we've talked about this ongoing now for multiple years as, it should be kind of second nature to how decisions are being made, and if not, we should just be sure to keep pushing that point to department heads and during our own reviews. Specific question about, will the village be installing EV charging stations?
So, they're correct, there is no money in the capital budget for that. There actually has been, for the last couple of years, money available through the state to support that. Really the issue is identifying a location. There was a location identified, it was down in the vicinity of the library, which is obviously in the vicinity of the train station, and the library board did not want it there. So we didn't submit for the grant on that. Because it's got to be near a power source. So, and this one was close to the corner of the building. It was a pretty good location, but we had to go back to the drawing board.
So right now we're trying to look for new locations.
Yeah, it's not the highest priority on my personal list, but obviously it's out there. It's on the village's list to do this in the comprehensive plan. It was actually a mentioned item, so it's not that it's not on the list, but it's a matter of just identifying a good location for it.
And most likely will be partially grant funded.
I think so, yeah. So it may not, I mean, looking at the cost of these, it may not even be something that rises to the level of a capital.
Right, at one time you were talking about working with someone like ChargePoint, that they would be doing some installation for, so they would get the revenue from it, but it would become generally available to the public.
Yeah, that was one possibility. The other possibility is simply having it be.
Right.
So that's, again, you haven't made those decisions yet, so.
So then the points about vehicle purchase, fuel efficiency, electric or hybrid if possible, we've talked about that. I've certainly talked about that endlessly. Adaptable for multiple uses, and I think that's a good idea to keep in mind. Making sure that we're not getting, there's some cases where it's not possible to avoid it, but making sure we're getting multi-use vehicles that can do multiple services. And then that vehicles should have a longer lifespan. Well,
I could short circuit that whole thing here because I understand why the comment would have come through, but the relatively simple answer is that the useful life that you see, and you've probably heard this before from us, but the useful life that's shown on the debt service schedule on the capital budget is state prescribed life, and that's, you can amortize the debt that you borrow. So you can't.
So police vehicles are 3 years.
Yeah, you can't take a police car and amortize it over 10 years, for example. The maximum is 3 years, or it's 3.
There was a second.
That doesn't mean they last. That doesn't mean that's how long they physically last. If we take them out of service and get rid of them, we as you know, we have a garbage truck fleet that well exceeds its useful life according to this list. So, and fire trucks is another one. Sure.
So the police cruisers, once they're taken out of service, at some point they go to a municipal auction service.
Yes.
Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Do we have any? I was being asked this by email. Do we have any idea how much they might gather? I said about 5,000 or something like that. 5 to 6.
It depends. Yeah. There are some vehicles that we are able to pass down our fleet, but now that we have the electric parking officer's vehicle, we don't pass that down to the parking officer anymore. That was a routine place to put it. I can look it up. I don't recall. It really depends vehicle by vehicle.
Depends.
It could be $500.
It could be I think 1,700, 17, depends what it needs. Some have to get towed out, because there'll be a major, let's say, transmission blows, we don't want to repair it, it's not worth it, then they'll put it to
I don't know that we get very many police cars that bring us $5,000.
So under
It's
Absolutely.
probably under that.
2,500 and under.
Yeah. But we do it on an auction site. It's a government surplus auction site that we've used now pretty successfully for a bunch of years.
I guess there's a question about for specific. We'll look at the next 2 budgets. 18-19 about specifics of the shooting range.
Yeah. So I don't have a plan to show you, but I think we described it last time we met. That it's I guess you could look at it like it's a Quonset hut type thing, but it's a self-contained structure
They're shooting in.
that they're inside. That's
This is
it.
going to change the parking situation there, right, along Cyrus Field.
I mean,
The parking is just pull off the side of the road into the field. That's what's currently the parking over there.
I'm not sure where there's parking on Sayersfield Road. Where the
There isn't, except that's where it's been done. The
Oh.
police park there all the time for the not in the reservoir parking lot,
Right.
but along the side of the
On
road,
the other side of the street.
on the other side of the road.
Right, where there's a little bit of an opening. I think there's a water main that converge there, I think. But yeah,
There's some streams and water flows in the field, and there's some boulders that sort of
yeah,
demarcate an area that
yeah,
you
we
can't
can change
go
that.
to.
Yeah, this is up still by where the
We're not trying to pave that area though, or something like that.
No, not that I know of.
Because that would be kind of a red flag for the watershed, since
Sure.
it flows right into the reservoir.
Sure. Yeah, this the project, if there's anything if it's a pretty straightforward project, we'll certainly, you're welcome to see all the details, you know what I mean? It's not,
But the idea was really to help with the noise complaints.
Yeah.
The noise.
oh yeah, that's really all it's about.
But that's what the improvements were.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, I think we've talked before, I've already pointed out that the senior bus or transport van, if we can get it to be hybrid or electric, would be great.
Yeah.
We should start looking into those possibilities, because those costs are coming down, even though it doesn't look like Tesla will be making a large van very soon. But I'm just looking ahead. Fertigation, I can explain to them in the park.
Yeah, it's not to apply pesticides, by the way. The parking is pesticide free. This is essentially a fertilizer of some sort. So,
Liquid worms.
yeah.
Everything else pretty much,
Yeah, it's a lot of it was based on the years, which, like I said, is not a correct thing. Matson Park renovations, this is down in 1920. We're talking about largely the bathrooms. I think there's some fencing improvements that are envisioned. There's a separate playground project, but again, these are an extra year out, so these are not finalized. They're more placeholders at this point. But some of the work is being done on it.
so anyways, I think that most of this other stuff, everyone else can review pretty much on their own, but there's some interesting points being made, and definitely keep them in mind for the upcoming budget processes.
Yep, that's good. That's helpful.
And I suggested to Anne that she gets together with me and I can go through some of these things in more detail, but she should also, it'd be good to get engaged get some of the details ahead of time so it doesn't happen just on the night of the review.
Yeah, I mean, I happened to connect with Joe before this because he does have a Gator vehicle on here, and so my question is, what about an electric version of it? And he'd be diving into it at first, and it was a vehicle that he was using just within his parks, just for a little bit of transport. What he's concerned about is the one that he's got proposed here is for also use on the trails and maintenance and other work up there. So if they have a rugged enough vehicle that's electric, he'd be happy to.
I don't think it's
invest in
rugged, I think it's,
Yeah, well, so if it looks like it's something that can meet that need. Yeah, I mean, it's not.
Charge station,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
There you
a
go.
plug it one end or the other.
Plug in
But the thing is
the
that-
nature center.
It has a lot more torque and pulling power than
Yeah.
a standard gas would.
Yeah, right off the on first press of the gas. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so I will get together with them and try to review as much as I can. I'll probably send them to you after.
It seems like, I mean, big picture wise, like the total amount of debt, is,
Yeah.
it's not a huge increase.
Yeah, we are bumping up a little bit on the debt service in the coming year too. We did talk about last year the idea that if we needed to, that we had fund balance available to use to help offset some of the debt service costs. So I think we did use a little bit of that this year, and next year is a new year, but, you know, it didn't make sense to postpone most of the capital items that we were talking about, just because, you know, maybe it didn't make the graph look so nice, but, you know,
Yeah.
we had a little cushion, and that's why it's helpful to have the fund balance that we have.
A lot comes off house in 2022.
Right, so it's something to plan for.
Can I ask you about, I don't mean to stop that conversation, but the fire boat, did any of because of that, problem with the barge from the bridge, did we get any recovery from any insurance related to the fireboat, or was no damage done to the fireboat because of that?
Just the lift, I think.
Yeah,
The lift, not actually the lift is fine, it's
The
just
lift was fine.
the area, the piece of the actual heart of the lift is fine, but the area where it actually sits was what was screwed up, so.
Well, the boat wasn't on.
The boat wasn't there, right?
The boat was out of the water.
The boat's fine, and even the lift is fine, it's just the.
And that's not the village's dock, that's the boat club dock, so they have to
It's
recover.
actually,
Right.
it's over Bridge Street.
No, well, I mean, the boat club, it's
I think
Bridge Street Properties property, but they lease that property from the boat club, from the Bridge Street, so it's the boat club's responsibility to fix it. Well, let's put it this way, if they don't get it done, I'm not sure that the landlord is gonna get it done. So it's in their best interest to get it done. So last I heard, I have not kept up, you know, on top of this completely, but I know that there's been interaction between a variety of parties, not the least of which are the DEC and the Army Corps of Engineers, and also the contractor and their insurance, who are ultimately the ones responsible. So, you know, but it's kind of being handled privately. I realize we have some skin in the game because of our fireboat, but right now, Tarrytown? And so it is not the most convenient thing in the world, but it is not the end of the world either. So we have to wait till it plays out. I mean, that's as much as I know.
So have we actually accessed it for use?
Yes.
Even though it's up there?
Been a bunch of calls.
There were 4 calls this past weekend
Yeah.
on the water.
That would be the time when it would happen, I just
Yeah.
wondered if
Yes,
that
this
was
is
working.
this is the heavy time of year. But yes, it's not the first time we've actually, the village has had to keep the fireboat in Tarrytown. Because, you know, they obviously have marinas there, so. But I think that, I would say that I think that the boat club is fairly motivated because our revenue for storing the boat there is significant to their operations, so.
Right? Yeah, they
I'm sure they want to get the dock fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there are a lot of parties that have to cooperate to get the insurance.
Right.
I guess, right?
Okay, so that's basically it. Those are the few updates from the last time we talked. The plan, unless you have any major objections to the items, are we have our bond counsel working on preparing the bond resolutions that are needed for most of these projects. Some of these projects don't involve borrowing, but most of them do. And they're working on the bond resolutions, and the anticipation is that they'll be ready for Monday night. And that's it. And that's only to implement the first year of this capital budget, of course. Unless you want us to borrow the whole thing today.
So
So,
we're
yeah.
adopting the budget for the 1 year.
Well, you're adopting, technically you're adopting the full
1 year.
passing bond resolutions for the 1 year. You know what I'm saying? It's a multi-year capital budget, so they're
Right,
adopting the whole
it's
thing.
capital budget, but it's only authorization to spend the items that are written this year.
Yes, exactly. Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't actually, we will do this at the next regular meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Monday.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so we'll clean it up. If there's any questions, yeah, certainly let us know. But, we did talk about this in June, and then this is kind of a little cleanup after that. So parking. So the agenda,
Speak about something to clean up.
yeah, exactly.
Something easy.
So the agenda says discussion. Maybe I could have called it update, as far as that goes. I'm not gonna pull out in fact, I didn't even attach to this, the draft scheme that was sent around. There were some concerns with the way 6-hour parking was being allocated on the side streets. If you remember, the original plan essentially left virtually no 6-hour parking on any of the side streets. It was pointed out, and rightly so, the demand that exists for day tripper use of the train, and the fact that we confirmed and kind of expected that that was the case, that Metro North does not have enough short-term, non-permit parking available on their property. So effectively, that means we have been solving a problem all along, and we need to continue to solve that problem. Otherwise, it's a problem, different problem. My draft that I sent around had a suggestion. There were some concerns about it, and I spent a bit of time with Connie and Janice talking about the issues, since they were most closely in tune with it. And the net result is we don't have a final answer. I think what we'll need to do is, rethink it a bit, come up with a suggested solution. I think you're going to find, at least my impression, feel free if you hear something that's incorrect, but my impression is that there are going to be some needs and some concerns that you're not going to be able to meet, that you're simply going to have to look at it and say, well, if we do it this way, we'll be meeting this need, and if we do it this way, we'll be meeting this need, and which is the greater, and let's push forward. So,
But I think it's important that we acknowledge what all of those needs are.
right.
So we acknowledge that in making a decision in one direction, that we may not be solving the problem in another direction.
Right.
But at least realize that that's part of our decision.
Right, and not just
Absolutely.
proceed and people think that it was never even
Exactly.
considered.
I just don't want to, penalize a great number of people in the village who are not 9 to 5 commuters, or whatever the time frame of the commute is, 7:30 to 6:30 commute, whatever, and who are instead, going into the city on an ad hoc basis. Potentially, it could be anywhere from empty nesters to, seniors to people who have home offices.
Or job hunters, like I've used it a lot recently.
Right. So I think that we have to see that the 6-hour parking, as it is the only way to achieve that goal. So I was a little bit concerned about the discussion going back and forth in the email, because I felt like we don't want to get into a situation where we can't supply what's needed by the community. And, the balance is, I hate to say it, but like 6-hour parking up here on this end of the main street isn't going to cut it. People aren't going to be making use of that. They're wrong, and there's no motivation in it. So,
one of the things I thought after we met is that we have to be very careful before we change something to meet a perceived need by one. So we have 6-hour parking, to change it, to take away some of it in order to meet other needs. Changing it's a higher bar. Saying we've got this much and this much and this much, and but changing it is significant. And one of the things we talked about is if there was a way to put in more, I think there's also a need for more long-term parking for trained people, because not everybody comes back within 6 hours.
I know it's hard.
So if we could figure out a way to put in some, we were talking, and again, this was just general ideas, but on the west side of the train tracks, that's really Metro North. But we were talking about if we could get control of that, it could be metered parking for 12 hours, that would be great. if we could capture the 4 spots by the tracks, south of Brazora's parking, so we can look, and that lot at the bottom of Vesta, if we could look at creative ways to try and, do that, so that we can also, not instead, but maybe also, meet some of the needs of the people on the lower streets off Main Street who feel terribly burdened by the fact that they're parked in front of their houses, which I understand. But it's been that way, and to change that, I think we have to be very careful about saying, okay, you have 2 cookies and he only has 1 cookie, so I'm going to take one of your cookies and give it to him, until we're really clear how many overall cookies we got.
So the question about that comes up, and I think I know the answer, but as far as the parking over near MP Jabrona, that area, how long is that under contract to the Metro? That's village property, right?
We're talking about on West Main Street.
Yeah.
That's village property, and it's
Both sides of the street?
well, yeah, I mean, the entire roadway is village property. There's basically there's no sidewalk area or anything like that.
There's no parking on the other side.
But there's only parking on the north side of West Main Street.
Actually, not all the way down it.
No, it's
You know,
the school.
Oh, no, you're right. No, I was thinking,
You're thinking Bridge Street, coming down from Madison Park,
Yeah, I'm
right?
thinking about, because I was actually that, how soon can we get out of a contract with Metro?
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at the date on that, but to be honest with you, I think that they would have no problem having us take over the on-street parking there. I don't think that's an issue. I think we could take that over, but then that still leaves the question of what do you do with it? Does it remain, if we're talking about Bridge Street, on the west side of Bridge Street, right, coming down from Madison Park by where the boat club is, and down the hill.
And the east side.
And the east side, yeah, I think right now it's just time limited though.
Yeah, that is now, you're right, yeah, the other side is.
Right. So then the question is, what do we do with it? Right now it's meeting the need of short-term parking for the train, I believe, at least on the west.
Well, I was down there looking at the whole,
It's essentially metered spaces. I'm not sure that the meter works right.
well, here's what the sign says. I took a picture of the sign. It says temporarily out of service. And then underneath that is written, please go to the other side to pay or use the Passport parking, which is
Right.
this app.
Right.
So this is on the riverside of the tracks. And all those spots that are marked up and down, well, you don't call that Main Street, what do you call that, River Road?
Bridge Street.
Bridge Street, okay, Bridge Street, as you come around the curve and you
Right,
go
that's
down
the
the
part,
hill.
yeah.
All those spots were filled, I'd say it was about 8 in the morning but then my question was, do we know who is filling those? Or could they be Bridge Street property employees who simply can't fit into their parking lot? But the machine doesn't know if you get on a train.
Right, so the question I had though was, what, if it's metered parking, is it hourly metered parking or is
It's
it daily?
7-something hours for $7.
Honestly, I never got past the temporarily out of order sign, and I don't even deal with that, so.
Obviously, there are, I guess it's about 10 spots going down that. They were all full, so
Either we
either,
get some Matheson Park people.
so,
And as we get a lot of people too that park there that are on the waiting list for the train.
I was just gonna say, they're either trained
Which
or
ones are-
there's no way of knowing if they're also employees of Bridge Street.
It's possible, but I don't know that they have a shortage. I don't know that Bridge Street has a shortage of parking on their own property. They
Well, they have their guard there.
Not,
And-
not,
All right, so that would be an interesting question to me, what do we know about? And,
what's the time? For Bridge Street.
It's 2 hours.
It's 2 hours.
I think it's 2 hours.
And what's the reasoning for it to be 2 hours?
It's parking for Madison Park is my guess. Because then there's also parking up on.
Right, I mean, my point is
How
we
many
need to count
parking?
up all those spots. We need to count up how many spots have we assigned as Matheson Park parking?
I mean, if that's
How many
what-
parks, how many spots have we assigned as 6-hour parking? And I think the idea of perhaps having up to 12-hour metered parking that the village controls is a great idea, particularly on that west side. And as I've said to you before, I think we can add 2 or 3 spots up closer to the boat club. That's now
Yeah.
just marked off with hatched lines.
Right.
I think we could squeeze a few spots. I mean, all we've ever done up till now is taken away spots one at a time. If we could add a few, I think it's gonna help.
What we were looking at when we were talking, and I was looking again as I was walking around, and kind of to your point that we obviously have to think of the needs of various groups. And if we could find more spots, that would be a good thing. I mean, everybody's looking for scarce goods. So with that in mind, you're just looking everywhere in that general area that somebody could reasonably expect to walk to the train. Now, I guess most people that take the train have to pay quite a bit. I mean, they're paying a permit, right? So those people who are taking the train occasionally aren't paying anything, right?
Well, depends on where you park.
Well, if you use those that are usually told by
I
the,
know I park, when I park,
Right.
usually Kira moves my car, but if I've gone, 7 hours, I almost always get a ticket, because it's pretty easy. 6 hours.
you mean
spots.
on the street?
On side streets and on Main Street, I've got tickets on both. One was the alternate side, I didn't read the side.
Good for you, good for you, I'm glad to hear.
I think you're the only one that gets tickets.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. So I'm
These
just,
8 days of
Everyone. I keep the receipts just in case.
Well, that's a very good point. A lot of people just play roulette with those 6-hour spots.
Yeah.
You know, depending on what, if you miss your train from Grand Central, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
1 hour over. And longer-term meters along Bridge Street would really help a lot, because the Metro North, the parking, and we've discussed this, but the meters in the actual Metro North, a lot further, first they're all the way at the end, so you have to drive like 6 miles before you get there. I've never seen one free, ever.
Yeah.
So nobody's gonna even try, because it's just not worth it. You're better off parking for 6 hours and hoping for the best.
Yeah, paying $20, whatever it is. And I just thought it was really interesting, and it's not new technology, it was new to me, but using license plate readers to do the hourly enforcement. So you just drive through, you don't have to chalk tires or anything, you drive through, it reads all of, and it's,
we did a little exploring of that.
Elmsford just did a huge thing on it.
Yeah, the initial, what we got back initially is that the investment's pretty big in terms of equipment, but, it's something we still can look at.
Yeah, especially when we start having meters too. We have our own meters to enforce. You can just try, especially because they're like all on the phone apps, so it's not that you see anything. It's all done by the LPRs.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement about this, right? That we're gonna try and see where we can possibly squeeze out more additional, better, longer-term parking, which would allow us to look at the time limits on the side streets. Because it's, it's sociology 101, allocation of scarce resources. So before we take away somebody's cooking, we have to be sure we're trying to balance it correctly.
Right.
So, but there was a few things, and Larry, also thank you for all of the time we put into this, because every time it's like whack-a-mole, every time you think you have it,
It's a good way to describe it.
something else pops up. But it does seem that increasing the Main Street parking from 1 hour to 2 hours, that seems to be completely uncontroversial and a very good idea. And I know we want to get this all like in one package.
Do a piecemeal.
We may want to think about doing it one thing at a time, because the other thing that I think we have to address sooner rather than later, I was gobsmacked, as you know, when this guy on Hillside Terrace, we said we're not going to be ticketing for overnight parking, and then he gets a ticket for alternate side of the street, and we went, the code does not give a time limit for alternate side of the street parking. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the left side of the street, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on the other side.
It changes at midnight.
At midnight. So you have to move your car every night at midnight, which is ridiculous. That's certainly not the intent.
and it doesn't happen in other areas that are marked differently, where it says Monday you know, it's from 8 to 10, that it's the alternate side.
Right.
So it's not consistent across the village.
Right, but there's a whole bunch of streets that are in the same section as that.
Right.
That have the alternate side without any time limit.
You know, Riverview's like that. Riverview's like that.
Yeah.
But I think most of the side
Right.
streets.
So once you're in the downtown area, there are alternate side, but only.
Oh,
So
that's
what
what
I
it is.
started seeing that on Cedar Ridge was because the streets were narrow, so it was a way of allowing you to park on only one side of the street and keep the lane open.
That's how I.
That's how I read it.
Sure, but again, if it changes, as everybody runs outside at midnight to move their car, I mean, yes, that's an absolutely important thing to accomplish. And it's a good way of making sure that nobody
So
just
when
dumps.
would you change it?
Hmm?
When would you change it?
I think you have to have a shorter, it can't be 24 hours. It's maybe from midnight to 6, or if DPW needs.
And you can block the road.
Yeah, but there's overriding vehicle and traffic laws about that, if I'm not mistaken. In other words,
I would,
yeah, regardless of how things are signed.
drive up Riverview Road now, because when people do that, they literally leave like a car length and a half, and it's going on for about 6 months. It's a nightmare on my road, and they don't follow any of the
And
laws.
Hillside Terrace is the same way. Whenever I used to go visit Nikki on the end, Nikki and Peter on the end, if people had parked like this, you were like weaving, because it was an obstacle course. It was, the streets there are just too narrow for,
So,
I do want to just
so
add,
there's an answer, which is, what's the right time to make it switch?
yeah, exactly.
No,
And it's,
and how to make it readable on the sign.
well, at least if we change it.
I'm just thinking, you know,
Yeah.
let's just say, let's say the having to weave is an issue that you're trying to solve. The way the signs are now solves that problem, but it's not practically workable because the changeover is midnight. So, okay, you make the changeover at 8 a.m. How do you put that on the sign? So 8 a.m. Tuesday to 8 a.m. Wednesday, you can park on this side. Then 8 a.m. Wednesday to 8 a.m. Thursday, you're parking, that's.
But that's not actually, no parking, 8 a.m., oh, I see. But
If you do it a full 24 hours, you're saying do it shorter, but then that leaves a window of time where theoretically people could park on both sides.
And you wouldn't be able to get a fire truck through at that point, I don't think.
Right.
I just wanted to bring back, it's not related to this, it's the bigger issue that we, I think Larry and I at least go back 6 or 7 years talking about this, or even more when the Irvington Business Improvement Committee started talking about this, which was even before I started on this in 2009. So one of the things that has been a major concern are people in the downtown area who come home from work, 6 o'clock or whatever, and simply can't park on their own street, right? Or even one very close. So that was one of the things that we were trying to solve, was how we had people come in. I don't know if that was 4 years ago. We had some business folks come in. We had some residents of South Ecker and other places, Astor Street, and we tried to get a sense of, you know, what is the problem and what might work. And one of the things about the downtown side streets that seemed fairly well received was the idea of changing the side streets from 6 hour to 2 hour, which meant that because the residents would have their resident sticker, that was great, because even with a resident sticker, it wasn't very helpful if people were there for 6 hours. They couldn't park. And that seemed to be a very real concern that I thought made a lot of sense. This is a big everyday problem, not an occasional problem of, you know, kind of going to the train station, which is significant, but not a almost everyday problem. So I would just like to make sure, as we work this schema through, that we continue to think about the needs of the people who
Right,
live
so
on
that's
those
another
sides.
part of the narrative, as Larry likes to call
Say it
it.
again?
That's another part of the narrative.
Oh,
that
yes,
we need
yes.
to address
Right.
and acknowledge that we're trying to solve.
Right, and when I said Business Improvement Committee, we were concerned that the business owners or the workers mostly parked right in front of their businesses, which meant that the patrons of those businesses couldn't come and use those businesses. It seems a little counterintuitive,
I mean,
but.
that's the side streets too.
Yes, right.
Close
And that would
to-
happen,
close to
right.
You know, all the people working in
Right.
restaurants, they
Yes.
have to park on the
Yeah.
side streets for
So,
6 hours.
but then it was discussed, you know, if you worked there, could you agree if you had like that lower lot or somewhere else, that workers who work there could be actually encouraged to park in particular other places, leaving spaces for patrons, which would make sense for a business to be able to say to your customers, you'll be able to come to our business, parking is not such a problem. So all those things, and then I think we did have in the comprehensive plan about the commercial vehicles, not, you know, and what if, because that seems to be a more prevalent issue now than it was maybe a few years ago, that the fairly big commercial vehicles are taking up quite a bit of space, and that's a problem. So,
I was gonna say, this is one of my summer projects is writing up the laws. Recommended that those might be there were two of them actually. There was,
Oversized commercial vehicles.
Right.
right.
restrictions. I was bringing it up as something I was.
Side streets,
Well, I mean, if you want,
Right.
That's what I
I could
But
do
there was
that
talking
next,
on
but I
Main
just
Street
need
and
to
there was
under.
talking off Main Street, that was two separate.
There was a very, just the other night, there was a very, Wednesday, yeah, last night. Last night, yeah, maybe it was.
Yeah, it's like the good
Very
news.
large- There was a very large commercial vehicle parked right near the nail salon, I think it was Monday night. And it was basically taking up 1.5 spaces plus kind of wide out into the street.
And then it's also, you can't see to come out the side streets with those bigger vehicles. I mean, there are many, many problems.
This was one of the recommendations, amend the parking regulations to prohibit parking commercial and oversized vehicles during the daytime on the side streets off Main Street. The prohibition would not include parking while engaged in normal business. Just go ahead and do that.
And then wasn't there also
And
one?
then amend the parking regulations to prohibit overnight parking of commercial vehicles in the business district except in designated areas. But do we have any idea?
We don't really haven't solved that last phrase.
We've solved that.
I don't think we-
We're not ready to do that one.
No, I think that's,
Find some designated areas,
yeah.
right? We have a couple over there, and then we have the very limited village spots, right, the people.
Well, you know what, I'll draft the first one, that other one I can also draft.
Yeah, you know, it's
It's
always
always
good.
good.
It's always
Something.
good.
Larry a couple weeks.
You know, actually,
So do the
sometimes.
easy stuff and
It
leave the
does
hard
help.
stuff for everyone.
Right, no, but sometimes it's not until you write these
I know.
things up that you realize what the issues are.
Yes.
Oh, I
You know, like for instance, we have to define commercial, there is no, believe it or not, there's no definition of commercial vehicles in the vehicle and traffic law. So we'll have to write up, there's not.
No, but this came up, I've seen something on this. I now have to think back to what it was. but
We had a terrible problem with that in Hastings,
No,
with
no, I
somebody
know.
ran a bus. There are commercial licenses, but you can still be a commercial vehicle.
Right.
But anyway, it's not a big deal. I saw one station that had a very good breakdown of commercial vehicles. So anyway, so it's at least
It has
get
more
a
than
little bit
5
stuff
years.
on that.
Question for you, I just happened to run into the chief when I walked out of Village Hall the other day, and we were talking about just generally traffic and parking, whatever. Has he been involved in any of the conversations about parking?
I've talked to him about parking, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, one of the things he mentioned, which as soon as he said it, was like, oh, that makes sense. If you're parking in the angled parking, not the big commercial vehicles, but the Silverados, the bins.
Right.
If you are downhill of one of those and you're trying to back out, oh my God. So he suggested those should only be allowed on the other side of the street.
Right.
Wow, that makes sense. Anyway, just.
Yes, but when they come to deliver and there's no space and they're going to the next town in 15 minutes, they're just gonna pull up somewhere. And
Well, if they're there unloading and you're trying to back out, they're usually helpful and they help you get out, but, anyway, it was just one of those serendipitous comments.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, there were just two other things that
Yeah, go ahead.
that go together with this, that's not unknown to any everybody, and that is that comprehensive enforcement is something separate from changing the law, but we've always said it's so confusing. The signage doesn't match the code. It's hard to explain what the enforcement is. So, I mean, my friend Brenda came to visit me today, said, you can't see South Paris sign. I mean, it's so light, and so the signage is a problem, enforcement is a problem, and those were things that, at least when I was talking about this a few years ago, it was like, okay, we'll wait on those two things until we do this master plan. Then the signage will come along, the contradictions in the code will be worked out, and, you know, it will be a 21st century system. So, those two things have waited because the master plan has waited. So, I just think it's an important issue. It's certainly important every single day for people that live here in the downtown. Parking is an issue
Yes, it
every
is.
day.
It's
like daily life. So,
Well, parking signs we get from Greenberg.
yeah, it's not wayfinding, but it's just the regular.
You know, street signs and other things is a different story.
But I'm just saying.
But Larry, I just want to get back to the thing you said about the signs, about how you're gonna put all that on a sign. No, spending way too much time in Washington DC, I'll tell you, that's how their signs are.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
it's
just take the time to read.
Second sign under the sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can, no, once you're right, you can fit a lot on, you know. No, it's right. It seems like a lot, but it's actually readable, and when you stop and you read it.
You've got
So
to.
you make it 8 to 8 rather than midnight, you know,
Yeah.
so you have to
No, I
worry.
realize it's not
It
a
is
reason to not
It's
do
not
something.
your usual, you know,
And
it's not that bad.
And there's probably another municipality who's figured out the wording on a lot of these signs that is the least number of words to communicate
To
what
legally
it
be
is.
enforceable.
Right, like they group tested it. When people read it this way, they say, oh, so I can park upside down. Okay.
But moving your car at 8 in the morning is not unreasonable, moving it at midnight is ridiculous.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and, you know, honestly, and just in terms of this is just one guy, but that one guy who got I don't know him at all, but he got the petition, and we basically said to him, okay, we're moving, kicking you for night parking. And he's getting tickets for walking the side of the street. And, you know, he's gonna get another ticket sometime real soon.
He also got on parking the wrong way. And he's-
Yeah. So what do we do in the short term?
Well, these are the same kind of problems that 6 and 8 years ago we've been dealing with down here. So there are incredibly ridiculous conflicts between signage
Can
and.
everyone just speak up separately? That seems to be totally different from.
Well, look, remember, the only reason the alternate side is a problem is because we're allowing overnight parking.
Yeah, right. It wasn't, I mean, people here understood that.
No, but so now, you know, this topic, but it's the same effect, he's just getting ticketed for a different part of the provision.
No, I understand.
But it's still, but we basically said, we understand and you're right, it's not a problem for you to park overnight on this street. We're not talking about, it's a big problem obviously on your street, Brian, but it's not, on his street, we tried to deal with it by just making an exception. So, do we wanna make an exception for another, you know, from 8 AM to 8 PM? You know, but I think it's kind of hard to let this.
8 PM to 8 PM if it's
Yeah,
all.
sure. It doesn't matter.
You're saying 8 AM to 8 PM.
It doesn't matter, 8 PM to 8 AM, whatever, but can
It's
we?
8 AM
No,
to
no,
8
it's
AM.
It's either 8 AM to 8 AM or 8 PM to 8 PM.
I'm
It's
sorry,
every
I missed-
24
right,
hours.
sorry, but can we just like, can we just like do it for that one street since I mean, it seems like if we went to all the trouble, the premise was that he was gonna get ticketed for parking
But now
overnight,
it's
he
like,
still is.
he also got a ticket once for parking facing the wrong way. We're gonna say that's also fine because, you know, like, I mean, to me, it's like the alternate side is completely different than overnight. But now he's saying, well, now we're letting you park overnight. You never used to be able to park after 11, so you didn't have to move it at midnight. Like, you know, it's a.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing with parking. You change one thing and it creates another problem.
Exactly right.
But, I mean,
Like she's saying, one from whack-a-mole.
no,
I know, it's like,
no good deed goes unpunished. It's another one. But, I mean, can't we say that for that particular area without changing anything, just to not enforce that until, 8 in the morning,
Okay.
We can't do the new sign.
Until we get the call that someone
Until-
can't get through because
Yeah,
people
okay.
are.
Well, you
but
might
we
be
can-
right,
we
you
can-
might
We
be
can just say,
right.
let them do whatever they want, it's the
No,
Wild
no,
West.
no,
and
I
that's
believe that, I
is
believe
in
that.
charge. No, I'm,
Right, but
it's only like, to me, it's like, I don't know, it's
It's a little harder because then if we all decide here at the table that it's 8 AM and we communicate that to the police department, like, it has to be communicated now to the residents there because it's not gonna be on the sign.
Yeah, right.
So now, but then when the police department comes by at 8:15 and they're still parked on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, right, and then
is that
somebody
okay,
said,
or-
but it's not signage, it's no
It's not a-
signage that explains it. This is why this isn't solved. This is all.
That's what they do when we just said, how would we said overnight parking's fine everywhere? That's where we were kind of leaning at one time.
Oh, and then we heard
And then
from
we
a
heard-
million people
exactly,
saying,
so
oh
it
my
was-
God, no.
Even though we couldn't give a reason why we can't have overnight parking.
Yeah,
Right.
but I think in the outer
Did you get rid
areas.
of that? I forgot, did you get rid of that?
No,
It was just part of the grand plan.
But in this particular area, he's the only guy that appears to park overnight, and none of the other residents do, and nobody cared. And I completely get it. You make an exception, and I realize we got led down this primrose path saying, no. The only other thing to say to him is you're gonna get a ticket, you have to call every night. But if we're not gonna fix this for him, and I'm not advocating for him, but if we are saying we can't make an exception, then I would like us to tell them that
But,
up front.
do we want to say 8 AM to 8 AM, and then again, if he gets a ticket at 8:15, he can't complain that he got a ticket at 8:15?
Yeah.
That's,
Why are we changing alternate sides to begin with? How frequently does the DPW go in there to clean up? It doesn't go in there every other day.
No, this particular area is not, it's not a DPW issue. They use the alternate days to be able to go in to clean up. But the alternate regulations are there even on the weekends, as you know, Saturday and Sunday. There's no cleaning up going on then. They're there because of the narrow streets. I mean, that's the issue that.
But I'm wondering if we're thinking about it.
But if he's the only one that parks on the street, is
Yes,
he
I-
really the only one that parks on the
I
street?
did. I
Well,
tried.
why don't you just eliminate parking on the other
I'm not
side?
sure he's gonna be the only
No,
one.
right, but then when your son comes and your
Right.
daughter comes and the cousin comes all on
Then
the
they
same
park
day.
across the
we
street.
should have a
why
placard
don't
that
you
says
Just
I
have
can park
parking
wherever I
on one
want.
side
For
of the
instance-
street.
But
He's
you're
the
saying,
only guy that has a one-car garage and a short driveway.
No, but just say that you can only park on one side of the street.
That's-
So-
That's it, you say one side of the street except for 2 hours on one day when the DPW cleans.
Yeah, what's the big deal? Somebody has to cross the
That's
street.
fine. We gotta change the law, right? So that's.
Yeah, you have to change a lot, but I
When we do
mean,
that,
you basically pick
This
side of
is
the
what
street,
it's
it's the
used in the
same.
sign.
and make sure it's
nothing
something
to
else.
do with, up there, it has nothing to do with cleaning. Down here, it's
Yeah.
about cleaning the street. The alternate side is so that the.
And that, you can still do that once a
the
month,
back's all
whatever,
thing.
once a week.
Once a week.
Once a week for 2 hours.
For 2 hours.
But when we discussed the schema before, we
We have
talked
to
about
count,
they
we
don't
have to
really
count how many
need 2
parking
hours.
spots there are on either side of the street to see which side has
Has the most.
driveways and
There's
more
gonna be a
cars.
problem. It's a side.
Oh.
I can't identify what it is.
Very side.
Why do you have to have the
So
cars
how
on
many-
my side? Because I don't wanna look out my window and always see a car.
Well, in this case, it's easy, make it on his side of the street, because he's the only one who parks on the
But then
street.
his neighbor won't say.
His neighbors all signed the petition saying they don't care.
Wait till they have to park, cars parked all the time on their side. I mean, we have people on our street that say, never, 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 never have overnight parking, and others think it's absolutely great, just within, yeah.
Can we go
So-
on to the next topic? I'm sorry.
Well, why don't we ask him if that would work for his community up there, if it's all on one side?
Okay, do you want me to deal?
Sure.
Because what are we doing for the ticket that he's going to inevitably get?
That's,
Well,
for which one? We're gonna change
Well,
this.
you should follow the law until we change it.
But the law now means he has to move his car every night at midnight.
So do you want up at midnight? Can he, is that his son or daughter? Is he over 22?
I'm not arguing that we should change it, I'm just saying, is the message to him that while we're discussing the possible changes,
When do we tell the police department not to? If we could pass this law in August, right? That we could change that one street to parking only on the west side or north side or east side, whatever it is. Is that possible?
I can write it up. I don't know which street it is. I know
Well,
what
actually, it makes a lot of sense, because if you think about, if it's the street, if it's Cedar Ridge, right? That whole length, there's no houses. Except for maybe one house, the ex-Silver house, that faces south, almost all of them are either corner lots facing the side streets, or they're lots on the south side of the street facing north. Does that make sense? All the other houses are generally facing.
Where are you, Mark?
I'm talking about Cedar
Oh,
Ridge. I don't know, how did we get into that? Oh, because you could pick a side of the street that had the least impact on houses, it's probably the north side of the street, which is, as
But that's not the case in Hillside, where there's houses on both sides.
that's right, I'm just talking about for Cedar Ridge. But see, you would be posting that, it would be on the wrong side of the street. So Cedar.
So, I'm telling him that we're not changing the alternate side of the street parking yet, and that's.
We can tell the police not to enforce it, and I'm going to make sure I block it in the road every night. No, we can tell the police not to enforce it until we change the law, and then he doesn't have to worry about getting his $10 ticket once every 7 years.
Is that,
That's what you tell me to do, that's what they're gonna do.
I think it's reasonable, just because we gotta figure a solution for this that
Well,
makes sense.
yeah.
and because I'm just feeling like we said, okay, overnight
You know
parking
which
is
side
really
of
the
the
case,
street
it's
he's
not a
on?
problem. If you turn up Hillside, he's the first house on the left.
That'd be a south side, wouldn't it?
No, the south
It would
side.
be a south side.
Almost all the houses are on the
South
south
side.
side.
I missed it.
North side.
There are houses on both sides, but almost all of them have long driveways and,
Go check it out,
But,
and
you
see,
know,
most of the houses.
you want to make
along
the
north side
argument
are
that, you know, when you
residential.
bought the house, you knew it had a short
oh,
driveway.
yeah, no, and that's the other thing, and that's very good, and that's the other thing that I struggle with. When he bought this house, he knew it had one car garage and a short truck. When people bought houses on Lookout, they knew they
Right.
didn't have garages or
Right, but
driveways.
they also didn't have 700 people working down there, 3 restaurants with many employees, a lot of patrons, and a lot of people. So, you know, those are changeable things. There's nothing changed up in that neighborhood. So,
Except he started getting tickets.
except for just that people out. So I'm just,
It's a good idea.
I guess the thing
People
is,
can only have those smart cars.
I know we have to move on to the next thing, but the issues that people have complained about for 6 or 7 years downtown, in the downtown area, it would be nice to solve their problem too. I mean, we're spending a lot of time helping this man, which is nice, but I've seen the same
Yeah.
concerns for many, many
I think
years.
the biggest difference is that we change something on Hillside, it's not gonna have any rollover effects, but if we say everything's
Yeah, these are all
15-minute parking on every side of the street, so
Well,
you
that's
always
what
have
I'm
turnover.
I'm glad.
There's no simple fix.
Right, but then
And
let's,
there's no further impact to Hillside.
and then let's not say that when you bought your house, you know, you knew the circumstance. Well, things are a problem you want to solve.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
but it's also true that.
But I also remember I didn't buy, there's a house I really liked, and on home place, and I didn't buy it, because we had 2 cars and
Yeah.
no driveway. It was like, then it was gonna be.
Yeah, right, so that's,
And his price was.
Is it for
that
sale?
house was-
Okay, so just so, because I honestly, I'm tired of getting emails from this guy.
but I have people talking to me for years, so I'm glad we can solve this guy's
So,
problem.
so I think it's important that we
It's the west side.
make it clear that the board thinks that this discussion is all well and good, but that it can't end here. We need to
We need a comprehensive
really
plan.
move forward and make this. a
I do
very
also
high
think
priority.
that we do definitely need a comprehensive plan, but I think there are certain things
Yes, I mean,
that we can fix in the short term, like maybe the 2-hour thing.
on Main Street.
On Main
Commercial
Street.
parking on side streets.
Commercial vehicle parking outside. I think there's certain things we can do that help in the short term that aren't in the master plan that seems to be eluding us, so.
No, agreed, and maybe we should like go for the low hanging fruit instead of holding.
At least we do something like that. And I do think there's a certain spot where we can say on Main Street, you know, kind of east, east at some point, where we can say, we don't need 6-hour parking on the side street, so that has more turnover. So then what's gonna happen, I think, is we're not gonna lose all the 6-hour spots for all the employees on Main Street, but, you know, it's a.
Well, this is,
Well, that's why
Well, let's
we
see,
have
so
to
if
make
we
it
do
a
2-hour parking on Main Street, maybe that will alleviate some of the people who are parking on the side streets because they want to park for more than 1 hour.
Part of Main Street.
Yeah.
So I think, Larry, it's incumbent on you to.
Once again,
so I'll just
You have
make
the
my,
folder that I have for this?
right.
The title of the folder, well, first, what's this thing? The title of the folder is overnight parking. That's all this was about.
Overnight parking.
Overnight
So,
parking.
so I'll make my last plea
And
that
it was
we,
dated 2012.
that, I'll make my last plea that we make a point to enforce at least the people who park for longer than 6 hours on the side streets, that we make a special effort to inform the police and the parking folks that if they must look at who's parking for more than 6 hours. And sometimes it's gonna be Brian, but sometimes it's gonna, that's what happens. But I think that,
I've seen them there every day.
well, the people that
Parking
live here.
tickets are only given by the traffic
What?
enforcement.
Chief communicated with the residents directly.
Good.
Parking tickets are only
But there,
given by
I'm sure there are others who
the
have that.
traffic enforcement.
Anyway, so we move on.
Not only,
One
maybe.
question.
Move on to the next
So
page.
Larry, you have what you need, you're gonna tell the cops to lay off on Hillside now at
Yes.
the moment.
Yes.
And this is not the perfect solution, but I just feel like we kind of let this guy down the garden path.
So his car is the only car that's allowed to park on the street.
That's right, if his daughter comes, no.
What color is it? Only
Right, I mean, we should know the plate.
There's a difference in having a list at the desk at the police sergeant where it has the license plates of everyone that has a special dispensation, so they don't have to call in every night. They call in, Anyways,
Beekeeping.
no, I have one more nit to pick. Is there any way, Larry, you could look into the drive-by license plate thing again?
Sure.
To see, or what kinds of systems are out there? Because it sure seems like to me that would be the number one way to increase enforcement.
We just had a presentation at the VOC about it, so talk to Elmsford, they're exploring like 75 different things, so.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because I think that's gonna be,
It would be a big help.
I'm not criticizing the enforcement officer, but I just think there's too much to do.
No, I think, we identified this long ago, that if you are increasing the amount of spaces that are going to have decreased time, that you need increased enforcement. I mean, you have to be in more places at once, which.
And signage.
And just being able to drive through is a lot different than having to talk.
Sure, yeah.
Especially with an electric.
Yeah.
You have the rate.
Yes.
It's out.
Actually, you do.
I mean,
Oh.
they were attached to the agenda.
Nissan's at 150.
Whatever.
But you learned me copies of the beekeeping.
Did you-
Is it the same as
Wait,
yours?
on the agenda, stop that.
Oh, you got it. Oh, okay.
It's on the-
But yours does like,
Is it highlighting show up?
Much the needle.
No.
It's the way it was.
Yeah, well, no, it's actually probably more helpful with the highlighting, so.
all right.
Okay, that's how I like it. Thank you.
But actually, both of those on this one.
Yeah.
You have interest, actually, not otherwise, no.
No, we have much.
No. No one decided to listen to me.
I'm interested.
Larry needs one.
Well, that Larry needs one, and
Is that Larry?
I'll take the rest.
I'll take care of the Larry's. Everyone else is on the
Okay. So I guess we just have to sort of start at the top. One thing on the beekeeping, do you want to limit the use to single-family districts? I think so. I mean, you don't want to,
If we have a
in
lot
the
of,
commercial
if we
district.
have a lot of people come out from the commercial or multifamily, then we'll say, we'll listen.
Yeah.
Can I throw one at you?
What?
In New York City and other cities, in urban environments, they're saying that rooftop
Yeah,
apiaries are actually quite effective and safe. Quite effective. So that would mean that. What are we trying to prevent here?
Well, why the single family? Because we're assuming that the recommendation was that they be on lots big enough that they're not gonna bother anybody else, and none of the other districts have lots that big.
Except if you rooftop business district, that's what
I did this to not focus on rooftop.
I know that, I'm just saying, is that the only other?
I think, well,
Just before, the timing of this is so perfect that the thing that Chet sent around about encouraging people to plant flowers that attract, trying to get more bees and so the timing is like perfect.
Yeah. See, the thing is that because doing that, my only argument is you increase the potential space of where it could be done. The question about the multifamily, I think most multifamilies, don't they have homeowners, I mean, you know, condo agreements or homeowners association
They can
agreements.
make rules that will override this.
That would basically,
I don't know what the rules say now.
exactly, but I mean, they would basically be able to disallow
Well, I'm
use.
thinking mainly from the space. I mean, it's sort of inconceivable that in a multifamily one, that your place is gonna be far enough from somebody else's that you're gonna.
Except that they had a community one, right?
But I think the roof thing is an important consideration, that it changes the,
Rooftops are
yeah, well, I don't know,
used by
like,
people.
what about the apartment building
In the
by
commercial district?
the train, you know, the one that was built by DiNardo that has 2 affordable units faces the railroad track? Wouldn't that have like a flat kind of roof that you could do something like that?
Right, it's right next to Hudson Lobs, and so
Yeah.
the party people
Right,
just stop
that's
by
right.
these.
You know, I don't know, could I just suggest that we just almost see whether you could come up for regulations for what would be the typical situation, you know, on a decent sized lot, and then maybe either come back to that or deal with it later.
Well, I agree, why don't we go through, because the requirements.
Well, that's one of
Let's
the
go through
questions,
this.
so.
Well, but, so we're not decided yet, but let's pretend like we said yes and go through the rest of it. Because we still are open-ended on the rooftop stuff, I think.
Okay. Now, do you want a review process, or you just want to let them be able to have it?
I think we let them have it.
But what is the definition?
That would be my recommendation.
Just let them have it.
You
And
just
that's
have, you
the
gotta beat these, right.
Here's the thing, by review, you're not saying no registration, you're saying no board review.
Well, you can have a registration, I mean, but what's the point? Why would you want
Well,
registration?
because somewhere in here it said the registration was you've read the apiary law, the B law, and you realize your requirements. And secondly,
Okay, well then, so you would,
conceivably, I like the idea also of neighbor notification, conceivably, that the one responsibility you might have is to let your neighbors know what you're doing, so that if
okay,
there's.
well, let's get to that when we get to it. So we'll say, do people think a registration makes sense?
Yes.
The way
If it's not,
Mark just described it, yes.
if it doesn't go through the planning board, but if it's just
Okay,
basically.
no, registration, just registration.
We should know where they are and who has them.
And
The beekeeper.
the price of registration is a quarter.
You know, and then I think,
Honey features.
I think we should probably clarify in the law and structure. Well, no, Larry asked Ed whether a hive would be considered a structure, but he says as long as it's movable, it wouldn't be a structure because it's not fixed on the ground, so that, because I wouldn't want it to have site plan approval because it's a structure.
But if it's a bee hotel, then
It has to be a bee bed and breakfast.
Does anybody
B&B.
Does anybody here understand?
yeah.
Does anybody here understand, and I cannot figure it out, and I went out to a bunch of sites today, you know, like basic beekeeping. What's the difference between an apiary, I know on paper, they say an apiary is a place where hives are kept. But how for the backyard beekeeper, is the apiary different from your hive?
More than one.
Does anybody know?
I can text my daughter. Does it? I don't know, text.
This is talking about.
An apiary is known as the bee yard. It's a location where beehives and honeybees
More
are
than
kept.
one.
So that's just a generic term for all of them, it seems.
So if you have
Like
a
a
hive
orchard.
in
See,
your
because some of the laws that here, you know, like Greenwood says, every hive shall be on an apiary. Well,
So that, I mean, when you have a hive, it becomes an apiary by design, isn't it? It's-
yeah.
You need two.
But you know
Be
what,
an
apiary
apiary,
is a
but
structure.
one
because it
is
the
not.
site plan approval.
Right.
But apiary is just a use, isn't it? It's not even a structure, it's a use.
A hive is a structure for housing a swarm of honeybees, or apiary is a place where bees and their hives are kept.
Right, exactly. Which means that it's really just a use of the yard, or the use of.
Yeah, so as we're going through here, what is, because
Yeah.
I took this from Greenberg, from Ossing, some other laws, and they referred to the apiaries, and it didn't make sense to me, which is then why I went and looked at the, okay.
You know
we'll
we're
get
way
to it
over
when
our
we get
skis.
to it.
We can't get the
I'm
basic
I'm
on.
asking Nikki. Yeah, was anybody in touch with her?
Yes, I did talk to her, I didn't ask for this, but I did talk to her about it.
And did
But
you?
as you come, there are only a few things that we discussed, maybe as.
Oh, as you talked to her, okay,
Yeah.
great, okay.
Right, yes, I gave her the heads up too, but she didn't really
Okay.
respond beyond thank
All
you.
right, so then, the other definitions, okay, then minimum lot size. Beekeeping shall be limited to the keeping of domestic honeybees on properties of at least 10,000 square feet.
Can you,
Now,
what is that zone?
what?
What is that? Is
It's
that
R10.
That would be an R10, and that's in an R5 or R75, you could, I mean, I just threw that in there, you can make it whatever minimum, whatever size you want. I just said, I pointed out that was the Greenberg's one, Ossining didn't seem to have a minimum lot size.
Why do we care? Do we care because of density of bees or because of closeness of neighbors?
Density of people.
Yeah. So with this definition, I don't think I can have a beehive in my yard.
Well, we don't have to keep the 10,000, but.
What did you say, what's,
An acre is 43,500 square
so
feet.
this is a quarter acre.
It's a quarter acre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
just
looked it
think
up. I didn't know that though.
quarter, half one. This is only 10, 20, 40, quarter, half one. Roughly, they're a little bit off.
So it means people, I'm just trying to think what neighborhoods couldn't do it. People, actually, I think I'm with.
Probably counting your neighborhood, right? It's probably a 7.5, isn't it, where you are?
Star Park,
Oh, I think I have,
Yeah.
I think I have almost a.
Star Park is smaller.
I mean, do you want to make it R5?
Well, that's
Well, you know what? Nikki's corner, the corner house on Jaffrey was a smallish Jaffrey one. How big is your, what is it, you're measuring the entire property line?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could, not have a limit, a size limit.
But is it gonna be, you have a setback from the property line requirement.
At least 20 feet, yeah.
Yeah, so that's gonna knock out any of the smaller properties. 'Cause-
Well, that to me, it's not a very significant setback for a beehive, 20 feet, I mean.
Right, if
so-
you can't meet that,
Then you shouldn't have one.
right, so then we may not need a
So maybe you
lot
don't
size
need a
as long as they
minimum
meet
lot
the
size.
That's
setback.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, so there's an actual zone with property, rather than a lot size.
Okay, now,
I mean, you don't want it 20 feet from the school bus stop,
so there is this explanation which Nikki can give much better, but it does apply here. And she said that once a hive is established, there is a particular direction that they go, and I think it's always somewhere in relationship to where the sun rises in it. So that they know, they travel, they don't just go left and right and just go all over. They go in a particular direction, and that would influence, if the neighbor is right here, that
east or
neighbor is a
southeast.
concern. But this neighbor over here, as close,
Well, it says
is
something
not
as well.
necessarily a concern.
Is
So,
it BPS?
so it's,
So
I
wait,
don't
so
know,
it's
maybe the laws
predictable
never
what
reflect
direction?
that, but that's what she was
Because they
explaining
go-
to me.
So, and how does that?
I don't know, like,
Maybe we should adjust the
So the
setback
20
to accommodate for that.
you might be protecting against something that
But
doesn't
50
happen.
feet if the sun rises in that direction?
Which
I mean,
direction should beehives face
It
for
has to do
pollination?
with, that's the way they
Usually
travel
south
when they
or
go
east.
out. Did you read it?
It's usually south or east. Southern
South
exposure
or
makes
east.
sense during the winter months, at least in the northern hemisphere, sunsets in the low horizon.
Yeah, that's a real thing, that's the way they go.
Yeah, my Google skills are strong.
Right. So,
say
Most of the
that-
time, it doesn't
Brian,
matter at
say
all.
it again.
Many backyard urban beekeepers are limited in their options on where and where to place their bees. The truth is, bees are flexible. And most of the time, they adjust to the environment they're in. When it comes to almond pollination, which is about to take place this month, as well as almonds, they say they should face some of them west and most of them east. This is wildflowermeadows.com. It's very
All right, so I think that we basically, someone, if they know bees, they're gonna pick their location in the yard that isn't the front yard, or isn't a shared side front on a corner. They're gonna have several yards, side yards, backyard, to pick the perfect location for their beehive. We're not telling them what direction to point it. That would be,
And it doesn't seem like it
No.
always has to be facing one way.
Okay, so how about we take out the minimum lot size?
And just
About
have
the minimum
and
lot
have a decent setback of 20, 25 feet, something
Got
like
it.
that.
Okay, we'll get to the setback. And, then, what about the limits? This was on lots of 10,000 and up to 40,000.
I'm sorry, where page are we on?
To be.
83, 5B.
Yeah, I have to change my page.
Okay, on lots of 10,000 square feet, or there's no minimum, so you can just say on lots of up to 40,000 square feet, no more than 2 bee colonies shall be
Okay.
permitted. I
So
understand
you're
what
allowing
you're saying.
two everywhere? I know we don't want to.
Supposedly, I don't know, the little bit that I read is you usually have 2.
Oh,
Usually have
okay.
two. It's
That
usually
there's-
have one.
It's usually not 1, you have 2
Okay.
because that, if the queen gets lost, they both need a queen. What?
They need a queen.
Talk about this. I wish we should have George Chief here.
So these were the Greenberg limits. I mean, they could be based on nothing. It seems reasonable that if you've got up to a 1 acre lot, you can have 2 hives and beyond that. And if you've got,
More than they agree.
you can have 4. But then there's also, regardless of lot size, where all the hives are situated at least 200 feet in any direction from all property lines, there's no limit on the number of colonies. So I think if it could be 200 feet, I don't think you care how many things. That seems reasonable. That wasn't in Greenberg, I saw this someplace. So, for B, I'll put on lots up to
You're getting dangerous.
Yeah, so that get deep now.
I'm gonna have to take your phone from you.
Yeah,
But you know, hopefully,
My dad.
people who are interested in this will show up at the public hearing and point out where this makes sense or doesn't make sense. Pardon?
If we're not getting it right, we'll get some information.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like from nowhere, but I mean,
I'll see if I can find like some
But
New York
that
State
means
Society of Apiary or
83.6 is kind of odd.
apiary.
I don't get that. What? You think it's obvious?
No, I said odd.
Yeah, I don't get it.
An apiary and a beehive.
Yeah, you know what though? I saw that in different laws. That all bee colonies shall be kept in appropriately sized, designed, and maintained apiaries with removable frames, but the hives have removable frames.
Right. So what does it say? Does it go
I
back?
don't think that's right. That's why I was hoping there'd be somebody here who did these things. So,
Well, I think the title apiaries is funny, but maybe it should just.
well, why would it should be the title if you're not? Because this whole requirement is that it has to be in.
Well, because an apiary is one or more bee colonies, I guess. Again, it's a use, not a physical
Yeah,
object.
you know, you guys don't have to work. I'm just going to have to look at this a little bit further because this to me didn't make sense. After I saw this guy online showing me how to make a beehive. It wasn't it's kind of interesting and the different things. See, because I didn't realize the hive was that wooden structure with all, you know, the slats, yeah. And there has to be 10 of them for some reason, and then with an 11th, yeah, it's all about the same. I don't know why it has to be. The bees count them or what, you know? Okay.
They never go at 9. We'd find a better
They mean
place.
it has to be in those wooden things versus just having a log. I don't know.
For me, I guess I'm used to it.
The basic legal definition just says apiary is also known as a bee yard. It's just an area where you have beehives.
Yeah.
That's what it says in Wikipedia.
Well, that's what
So
I'm.
apiary is a use and beehive is an object.
So I don't think this term apiary should be in here. I
So
think.
then, can I just say, then it goes and contradicts itself. Your beehives are honeybees, okay. Apiaries can come in many sizes and can be rural or urban depending on the honey production. First, okay, so different size yards, okay. It can also be a wall-less roof structure similar to a gazebo which houses hives.
That sounds like a
Does that sound like-
That sounds like a Wikipedia.
No. The stuff I'm
I'm going
talking,
into
the
that
stuff
right
is so confusing. No, it's not just Wikipedia. This stuff is like really, really confusing. Oh, the model beekeeping ordinance. That's where this apiary thing came from.
model written by,
Oh, it's from a state in Minnesota.
Okay.
And then,
Oh,
and
this is a good one, you'll like this one.
Greenberg's has a thing about apiary.
WikiDiff, I didn't even know this existed, WikiDiff, I swear. Okay, look at this, Brian, you'll wanna use this in the future.
I was already on that one tonight.
Hive reserve, apiary, what's the difference? Apiary, a hive is a structure for housing a swarm of honeybees, while apiary is a place where bees and their hives are kept.
See, I don't think we have to have apiary in it all. That I got from the two local laws, but actually the law that I thought was the best was the Dayton, Ohio one, and I see their provision says, colonies shall be maintained in hives with adequate space maintained in the hives to prevent overcrowding and swarming. It's a much better thing, and it also makes sense in terms of what the hive is. Okay, so I'm gonna change.
What's the title of that section?
What is it?
What's the title of that section? Not
Well,
a-
this calls it maintenance.
Maintenance.
I might come up with it.
But the next one, location of apiaries, actually makes sense, because it's location of where you're storing your beehives.
Yeah, but it's just confusing, I think. So you say no hive may be located in for any front yard. Okay. Right? I think that makes a lot more sense.
I can't believe I'm going down this hole of the
Yeah.
If you're not-
Okay.
I like
Hives,
chickens, I don't care about bees.
hives shall be located at least 20 feet from any property line. That 20 feet is Greenbrook. I don't know if you want to make it 20.
Now it's 20, what do you think?
Let's be different, 25.
25.
22, 2%, that was more.
The reason why is I just said more difference is better, more distance is better.
Yeah, okay. Now, and this probably relates to what you were saying, Mark. Greenberg also has this limitation. In instances where an abutting or adjacent resident provides medical documentation of a serious allergy to bee stings to the satisfaction of the town attorney, I'm gonna say to the village administrator.
Let's give it to town.
Yeah, the town attorney.
The apiary shall be located at least 200 feet from any
Oh, man,
property
this
line.
is,
I think that's a problem,
that's a problem.
because if you're giving, everybody's gonna say, you know,
yeah.
oh, I had, yes.
I think what we should just do is notice them, and then they gotta get themselves an EpiPen.
And we'll give $10 credit.
Well, maybe the beekeeper should also always have EpiPens around
Well, I mean, they should.
if a visitor or a neighbor gets stuck.
Well, maybe that should be a requirement, that a beekeeper has to have an EpiPen.
Then it happens to,
Wait, then is it,
who administers it?
who administers it, and is it,
The
They're
bees, the
self-administered.
keeper, the apiary.
So they have to take training now?
Management staff.
Train,
I
I mean,
to me, how many bee injuries are there versus dog injuries every year? It's,
I know.
I mean, see, the thing is, if you're not having a review process, it doesn't make any sense. If all you're saying is that they have to register, if we wanna do that, we'll get to that. But if you can do it, if you can do it as of right, how can you say that a neighbor then could come to the village and
No, you
say,
don't have that, that's stupid.
No,
can't
but you
do
can
this.
put a requirement on the beekeeper, like you've got it, coming down lower on page 3, that says that the beekeeper has to have a level of skill. They've got to be able to control swarms, they've got to be able to remediate nuisance conditions, and maybe they should be required to have an EpiPen to administer if someone has an anaphylactic response to their bees.
I'm having an anaphylactic response to your.
and obviously everybody in this room is qualified to know who's can meet the requirements of knowing how to keep bees. We have.
Well, we have a bee certificate.
Brenda, you can take a test, you gotta get a bee.
I think you should.
You gotta see, it doesn't
I'm
work out.
wondering, are there any classes that are given in Westchester where you can go Like my daughter
Get
went to a
registered.
class to learn all these things. She had a bee mentor and she did
Yeah,
this.
yeah, there are classes, I mean,
Was
the
it,
place
you know,
out of
basic
South,
training or
South
something?
Well, I
Presbyterian
would
Church
think
gives
it was
classes.
sexual
Right,
harassment.
like bee basic training.
There's a lot of bee training that's available.
Yeah, I mean, it's required, well, I mean, it's
Okay,
required.
let's get further
It's
on
required
that. So
to-
we don't want this thing about the medical notification.
No, my dog is allergic to bees.
Well, wait a minute, I'm not, I think that's a real issue. If somebody has a certifiable medical allergy to bees, I think that,
But you can't stop bees. Bees are everywhere.
no, I understand that, but it's a difference between, you know, I might be allergic to dogs, and I don't expect nobody to have dogs, but if somebody next door to me wants to raise dogs that shed a lot, it just sort of changes things, doesn't it?
Well, we can't stop them. No, is a dog raising that,
Could have as many
raising shedding
dogs
dogs,
as-
is that a home occupation?
There's no limit on the number of dogs you have as a pet. As far as I know, you can have,
Except whether you can walk around your yard or not.
It's definitely an issue, Janice.
So what do we do? I mean, the question is, how much of a nanny state are we? Do we allow bees or do we not? We keep trying to talk about putting bees into little plastic wrappers, but they don't live that way.
It's also, getting an EpiPen, I was just looking again, for getting an EpiPen, you need a prescription, so you'd have to,
oh,
you
right.
can't just buy them, so it's,
No, but I would think if you're allergic to bee stings, I mean,
but you're not, I'm the beekeeper.
You're not.
no, I don't think it makes sense for the beekeeper to have it.
It's tough.
In addition to which, it's less likely that they're gonna get the sting on your property. They're gonna get the sting from you.
You know they're gonna be flying that way every day.
No, I mean, you know, I understand the statement. Medical documentation of a serious allergy, what is this, the doctor has to write a note?
Well, I don't even know this, or allergies. How serious, does this just mean you get a big red welt? Or is it like- You can't,
It could be a range of responses.
And these are usually more.
It's not necessarily predictable, right? I mean, one time it could be a welt, the next time you could die.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
If you
absolutely.
have, if you have allergic to bees, yeah.
Or if it gets stung enough, sometimes you no longer are allergic.
That's why we should.
Not usually, but there's like no predictability based on prior stings, whether you.
For me?
What's your
But-
No, no,
response?
in general, what, yeah, what your response would be.
Really? So I could die from a bee sting?
does this make
Well,
you
why the hell
rethink
do I
your
want to
position
eat
about
bees now?
Does this make you-
I want an apiary, not an ossuary.
So that's suddenly, the amount in from the property line has just tripled. Your next thing may be fatal, does that make you see this in? It's just.
So when you come in for you register, you come in or you do it online and it says, have you informed your neighbors that you are, keeping bees? And in that process, every neighbor now knows that this person, right, is keeping bees. Now, the kid in that family is allergic, so what happens? They probably come in and, I don't know, they see Brenda, they see Larry, and something happens, and you
No,
say,
I'm kind of struggling with
yeah, yeah, so
all
then,
the notification and registration
Right.
gets together because
if you come in and
That's right.
say,
There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
So they come in and say, my kid's allergic.
Yeah.
Say, oh, too bad, you better buy an EpiPen, you know? I mean,
or you could say,
So you don't have pizza smoke coming up to kill you.
you're lucky when you do chickens.
You offer them a peanut butter.
well, you know what might happen in
We're getting
real life?
cynical.
This is on TV.
Yeah, it's so cynical right now.
We have to behave.
Don't you think that,
Don't worry, everyone tuned out. You don't have to worry about it.
It's
Maybe we
unbelievable.
should only allow them on roofs. Maybe that would solve it.
So,
I mean, I
wait, can I just make my point, when I was thinking, if somebody came to me and said, you know, Connie, my daughter is highly allergic, you know, I'd say, you know what, forget it, I'm not keeping bees.
Well, I just, we can't assume that
No, I
everybody's
know,
going
but there's a lot of that kind of thinking,
Yeah,
you know,
somewhere would, you would like to think that that's how most people respond, but you know there's gonna be some people who'll say too bad.
well,
Right, but in general, then
But in
you get
general,
shut.
that's,
I mean, what else do you do?
I would, right. So
I mean, generally,
there are bees around and,
you, generally, I think neighbors should be neighborly.
yeah, exactly.
But we can't legislate that, that's the
We
reason we
can't.
have legislation, because neighbors.
So then you say I've notified, you know,
But
everybody.
you're asking for a review process at this
No,
point.
it's not.
That's what this is
No,
applying.
and you have to, when you register, you have to sign that, yes, you notified all your neighbors. And maybe that, I mean, is it a public list? I think it should be. You know, if you move into the town and you have an allergic kid, shouldn't you be able to see a list of people
Sex
who have
offenders
these?
and beekeepers.
So if you're a
Venn diagram.
So if you're
I mean, if you how hard is it if you register for that
Oh, yeah,
list
that's
of
very-
properties to be public? Can't
If you're a
that list be
beekeeper-
easily online? Here are the places that have bees.
You know, just think how much more complicated this would be if we were discussing chickens.
You scared from that. No, was that a chicken?
They don't fly, they don't
They just-
fly, they just stay in one spot.
Well, I know someone in Riverview that had both bees and chickens, or does.
And what
So
happens?
if you notify your neighbors,
It's got the chickens.
like the registration says you have to, and one of your neighbors says, my child is
Allergic,
deathly allergic,
right?
does the beekeeper have a liability in that situation? If the beekeeper says, fine, I'm still doing it, my neighbor 20 feet away from me has
I
it.
would think so.
So we can leave it, at that, and the beekeeper is assuming the liability.
Well, yeah, but
They are required to
If
know.
a dead kid is in between the event and the liability, that's not exactly a good outcome either.
No, but I think what Larry's getting
It's
at
an
is somebody,
inconvenience to not do
yeah,
it.
but maybe you're not a nice neighbor,
Well,
but
you'd
you
say,
don't wanna
you know
get
what,
sued.
really, I don't wanna do this, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this registration paragraph at the bottom of 3, I mean, I don't really understand exactly what it means, but part of it is saying that the purpose of this registration is that the beekeepers are acknowledging that they understand what their responsibilities are as beekeepers. And if you're, you know, and you should have a responsibility to be aware that a person 20 feet away from you has an allergy.
I like the idea if the registration is used to actually just post it online
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
as a
saying.
public spot to go say, who's got bees?
Right. Really, I mean,
Not as a tattletale thing, but just as a public service.
Right.
can it be, does it need to be said in there that the beekeeper list will be publicly available online or something, so that, okay. Yeah.
So let me, okay, so what we want is a notice, the notice and registration.
Mhm.
No public hearing, right?
No public hearing.
Yeah, and also,
And then you want the list available on the village's website.
or somehow, or come into the office and get a list, I don't know, if you don't wanna make it
Yeah, I
public.
know, it's like when you hit the thing under.
I mean, you could say the list
Yeah,
available
yeah.
in the village clerk's office, but it probably makes more sense to just put it on the website, right? Which is easier for you guys.
It doesn't matter either way.
Because you can
It's
list
in
this
the
list
clerk's
as
office,
a
but it's also online. It's
You can make-
maintained by the clerk's office, but it's posted online.
You could simply make a page of the basic requirements and
You know, let's not put it in the law, because then we'll be violating the law for some reason, it doesn't get on the website. Just say it's available in the clerk's office, and they may decide to post
Do you
it.
have to renew your registration in this, or is it once you
Yes,
have
it says
it?
every
Well,
year.
no, we have to decide, I mean, do you want that? Do you want an annual registration?
I think once you register,
Yeah.
I think one's done, right?
I would think so.
Then if you want to take yourself off the list, you can.
Yeah.
Well, right, it says you have to notify them about abandonment or change in location of the hive. Or they
Okay. How about okay, let's go back up there, how about the flyaway barrier? That's in.
Where are we at, sorry?
83-8.
Page 3.
Yeah, no, I missed
Should
it.
we stay within, we changed the minimum to 25 feet now, right?
Yeah. Change it to 30?
Yeah, just to be different.
No, well, no, it's just, we just say any colony has to have this flyway. It's not wherever it's located, right?
It was
And
already
any
said.
colony has to, have this flyaway barrier.
Who is asking for this?
It's, and it's the third line, it says built up flyway barrier.
Okay. I meant to fix that.
Who's asking for this? What other places asked for this?
The flyaway barrier, I saw that in several places. I think, I say.
Part of what Nikki was talking to me about, you know, that they go in a direction, but you have to get them to go higher. I guess that's what this is.
Yeah, that's what this is
So
about.
that it's they're mostly up there unless you're
Well,
really tall.
Arsenine has a flight barrier, but it just says an appropriate flight barrier. It doesn't have a limit. I saw that in a couple of the blogs. This one, the model beekeeping thing from Minnesota, talks about
What?
it's almost the same as this that came from their model law. Greenberg has it.
I'm just a little
No, I take it back from Greenberg.
about how structured it has to be. I'm concerned about the notion that you have to have a solid wall is the first.
Because
And
planning
it's
board,
also in Dayton, Ohio. It's in a lot of
I know
laws.
that this means it would have to have review.
Yeah, that's a structure now.
I was gonna
Well,
say,
not
you're
as
planning board.
fences, but not if you put a shrub.
So, well, no,
You
I
could
know.
do shrubs, but if you put a wall or fence, yeah, you're gonna go to the planning. Well, I'm not sure that you have to go to the, I forget what the, you don't have to go to the planning board for all fences, I
Right.
forget.
No.
I think.
South wall,
we could
6
get
feet.
in- South wall, yeah, you would. if you
6
put
feet.
that. But
Yeah,
you
that's
can't-
not gonna fly, that's what I'm trying to say. I wonder if, I'm sorry.
Well, you can have dense vegetation.
But is this a real requirement? What I'm trying to say.
What I said is, I see it in most of the
I know
laws.
that.
6
Well,
feet
then what
of
do you
dense
mean, it's a
vegetation
real
is
requirement?
costly.
I mean, things can be in the laws, but is it actually something like, we need to talk to someone that knows about bees? It's effectively, you know, I know that bees, you want the front of the hive to be,
Mark, all I can say is that in every single one of the bee laws, this is the one provision that was in everything.
okay.
So
My
I,
concern is that we're creating a situation where we asked the hive to be at least 20 or 25 feet from the property line, but now you need to have, where any colony is situated within 25 feet of.
that's gonna come out. So it's gonna be, any hive has to have
See,
a
that's what I
flyaway barrier.
Because if the hive is facing my house and it's 25 feet from the barrier, from the property line, but it's not facing the property line,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's
If
in my,
it's 25 feet, yeah, it's 20, okay. Any colony, 5 feet, so if it's 30 feet out, it doesn't need the plywood
within, so why don't we just make the setback such that it doesn't require a flyaway barrier? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just a number. So is there some, I
Oh, I
understand,
see
that-
what you're saying, but what's the trigger for it?
and what is it actually doing? I mean, I know the one guy that I never asked Nikki about this, but I
see
had
what
friends
you're
that
saying.
bees for years, and they just knew, you know, it was facing actually southwest maybe, but they also just gently told people, you can walk about 20 feet, if you're not knowing to the hive, stay about 20 feet away from the entrance.
No, that's a good point, though. All of these things, where they have the flyaway barriers, say if it's in within 10 feet, or if it's within 25 feet, then you need this flyaway barrier. But if we're not allowing it within 25 feet, maybe we don't need the requirement.
Well, that's why I would like to just put a footnote, and we'll talk to Nikki directly maybe about the flyaway barrier and come back to it at that point, if that's all right with you.
Right, but I agree, I think if we can get it, so it's not required by our definition of setback.
Right, it can't be within 25 feet.
Except
So
on the
then it could
rooftop,
just come
where
out.
you have to put up suicide nets
It'd be easier for the-
for the residents that are on the roof, running from them.
Okay, so, yeah, I think it makes sense for that to come out.
If we can, but if otherwise,
No,
let's,
no, I think, no, because we're,
I'll do due diligence with Nikki.
okay,
You know,
all right, the water, I don't think anybody's gonna,
Modern Farmer has a very good article
on water?
on water, on keeping water, how it stops them from going to other places. There's a lot of
Yeah.
good stuff on Modern Farmer.
so maybe we should link to that.
Yeah.
No, maybe we should just make everyone read the Modern Farmer article.
Exactly, and subscribe.
Right, no, that's not a bad thing. Give it to them as part of the
All right, so the
registration.
duties of beekeeper, I think makes sense.
I like the way it's closed, it seems like they have to take an oath.
Oh, you know, I won't have to put, I just let you know,
Will be
where
educated.
it came from.
Planting bees.
Yeah, it's like the,
So is
Boy
everybody
Scout.
comfortable with that?
And you're repeating a nuisance condition. Your hives are the nuisance condition.
get rid of the hives, you're all set.
They're using the word apiaries again, and
Yeah,
you don't want to use it.
No,
It's
it's
coming out.
gonna be fixed.
Okay,
Marianne's brighter than a slug, she'll forget.
Find and replace.
find and replace.
No, then you have to go back and read.
Okay. And then I'm thinking what should be in the registration, and then, I don't know what you want for
I actually love the idea of handing out, if there's some good stuff on that Modern Farmer,
Yeah, I'm
have
sure
it,
find some
have
other.
a little universal packet.
Well, hopefully by the time they come to register with you, they'll know that stuff.
Yeah. The bees are coming tomorrow. Do you have any good articles or not?
Fortunately, it's a pretty complicated process. If you go on and you look, you know, like Beekeeper 101, it's pretty complicated, so it's not like you just,
The nice thing is,
you
it's
know,
easy
like,
as long as we have
it's
the
not
past.
like keeping an ant farm or something, you know?
Wow,
Um,
let's keep knocking.
Okay, what penalties on here?
You get to be locked up in a closed room with your hive for,
Angry to be alive.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, all right, that's enough for a,
Start.
draft, okay.
Bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast. Now, remember, this is not Airbnb.
This is land being made.
we know that.
That's why no one's, that's why no one's hearing that.
I think these questions might not be as hard, there's a lot of them, but they might be a little bit easier. All right, remember, we only wanted them on Broadway and Main Street.
Right.
So on Broadway, I think, if it's okay if we just put it as a use in the one-family districts, the only other uses on Broadway are the multifamily, the ones in the multifamily districts, okay?
What is, I'm sorry, Tenarderville district, is that a multifamily district?
Yeah, he's multifamily, yeah. But how could he ever, he can't have a bed and breakfast there anyway.
Yeah, but they could have beehives down at along Station Road.
No, okay.
Air,
That might be the one multi-family location that we should have to.
Okay, the use would be subject to special permit by the planning board.
Or, yeah, right.
Okay, on the use regulations for the one family. That's where they would be allowed by special permit. Okay, they would be allowed on lots fronting on Broadway, bed and breakfast establishments, subject to the following requirements. The outward appearance shall be limited to one family dwelling, and there shall be no indication of the bed and breakfast establishment from the exterior of the building except for a sign conforming with this chapter. Now, some codes limit the use to an already existing building. I mean,
I think that's, we don't want people tearing down or enlarging buildings in the historic district so they can have a bed and breakfast.
this is Broadway.
Oh, well, I thought,
We're gonna go to the, we gotta consider them separately.
okay, I was,
There might be some overlap on issues, but, so, I mean, it's like one of those, there's smaller houses on, Broadway, I mean, you wouldn't care if there was, you know, 10. So many houses.
right. think I just don't like the idea of tearing down existing structures to make a
Well, it
building.
doesn't necessarily mean tearing down, it might be, building something on the new, a lot that's where nothing was before.
There's no lots like that.
There's none left.
But we're talking about that we have, didn't we just establish a different zone on Broadway to allow for certain other kinds of uses? I'm just not sure we want to limit it to already existing buildings. There might be another building that goes up that is this is a very.
But it's got to be a residential building, so how do you have, so the only way to get a new building is to tear the old one down
Well,
or expand.
we used to have some of those little buildings on the west side where they park a lot of cars in front of the houses.
It's got two
I mean,
levels.
why would that person want to sit with the east side? What would hurt if one of those came down and got built?
What houses are we talking about?
Are you worried that somebody's gonna tear down an existing house specifically to have a B&B when there's this many
No, but
limits?
that's just
No,
not-
not yet.
Yeah, we're talking about non-historic houses, you're right, you don't want historic houses taken down, but if it's not a historic house, you
You
can't.
could do that right now. Could
Yeah.
somebody just say, I'm gonna rebuild this house, and then I rebuild it, and I put a sign out, and now it's a B&B.
As long as it's still gotta look like a one-family
Yeah.
dwelling, Mark.
Right, it's one thing to renovate a house, it's another thing to build one from scratch or to enlarge it for the purposes of B&B.
Okay, well, I think you've got to take a call, I mean,
I think it's
Okay.
okay to, what exactly the way you read, where's the paragraph that we're talking about?
well, it's 7A.
7A,
The
right.
provision's not in there, I
Right.
just point out that some of the codes I looked at did limit the use.
Okay, as long as we're not talking about the historic district, I won't complain about Broadway.
That was,
I just think it's gonna go through planning board review anyways. And they have the conformance to the nature of the neighborhood
Right.
argument, so
Okay.
are we taking away anything from them though? Are we taking any tools away from them?
Well, in the sense that it's an allowed use now, and it wasn't allowed before, it's totally new.
But we're not
use.
taking any other kind of tool away from them. We would be giving them one if we said we were limiting what kind of building could go on. But we're not, so status quo, right, for that.
It's hard to say, it's the status quo, this is a whole new provision. I'm sorry, but I know what you're getting at, but I can't analyze it. There was something that struck today in it.
Well, let's keep going and see.
Okay.
All right. The operator of the bed and breakfast establishment shall be the owner of the premises. I said, how about residing on an adjacent property? I know Dobbs Ferry lets the person reside on an adjacent
So it's like
property.
the building next door, I suppose.
Right, and I guess the thinking there is the person's immediately available. I have to say, I've been in B&Bs where the
That's
person's
fine.
been in the building
Adjacent.
next door, adjacent, I think.
It's logical. I'm trying to think if there's an unintended consequence, but
Well, I think it literally has to be adjacent because
Yeah.
not like 2 blocks away.
Yeah, not a neighboring property, it has to be an adjacent, okay. All right, the maximum number of bedrooms that can be available to overnight guests shall be, I don't know what number you want to come up with. I told you Dobbs Ferry had 6, Croton had 2, Austin had 8, Lewisboro had 3. This could be affected by the building code, but assuming,
Have to follow Dobbs if it otherwise.
I'd say certainly 6 or less.
Yeah, we're gonna be on 6.
And two
Okay,
seems
so
like
say
not
the
an option to
maximum-
Make it work, right?
maximum number is 6.
Yeah, because they have parking issues when they get up.
And then it does said the planning board shall determine and limit the number, because
so
it may be, okay. Maximum length of stay for any guest in the bed and breakfast.
Well, just think
And
about
I've seen a range from 3 nights to
If we
15
go on to
nights.
6, how many 5-bedroom residences do we have?
facing Broadway,
5-bedroom
that are
residences
single
or
family,
6-bedroom
that
residences?
aren't.
Well, that might, I remember somebody wanted to use that house next to the Carafiello one for B&B. That,
It's got
Yeah.
to have
That could have more than,
Yeah.
I do, and that's more than 6.
yeah,
but they have a lot of parking, so that's the
So it
case.
would be all right to have more than 6 in that example, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's gigantic, with a lot of parking.
So they apply for,
They can change the law,
Um,
but that hasn't been made yet.
Let's say 8. Maybe that takes it, what do you think?
I wouldn't go above 8.
All right, well,
I mean,
how about say 8?
The planning board's always gonna be looking at parking anyway, right?
Planning
Yeah,
board's
they,
gonna
you've
rule
gotta
that.
meet the parking requirement.
The planning board is
Parking
gonna
over
rule
that.
Okay, so then we can say 8,
So we'll
knowing
say
that
8, and I have to make sure it's okay with the building code.
Right, because at some point, you're no longer that, you're a hotel.
right, I'm thinking, how many bed and breakfasts have I
That's,
seen
that, lots of them are that.
Even
8's up pushing it.
8's high,
I've been in,
but
you know, beach places, I've been, they've got like 3 floors.
I think that
There's,
there's,
there are 3 on this floor, and 3 on this floor.
Imagine trying to feed them in the morning. It's like you just pull them up in front of a trough.
I've been in ones with 8.
It's open,
They
open.
still-
no, you come in at different times, you
Yeah,
have to say
and
what
finally,
time you
they
come in
finally
for
sit down
breakfast.
for breakfast, and you.
I stay in B&B's off, that's where we stay almost of the
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Okay.
The maximum length of stay for any guest in a bed and breakfast establishment shall be, how many nights? And I say the range I've seen is
Whoa.
3 to 15.
was there any limit that was more typical, or was it all over the map?
3 is over.
Say,
Three doesn't make any sense.
you know, for places that do a week, you know, you rent for a week.
Saturday to Saturday or something.
It's very typical.
It's gotta be at least 7. You can make the case for more, man. I guess you're just trying to avoid people living there, basically.
Yeah, I didn't.
On the other hand, if you have it longer, you have less turnover, which could be a benefit also.
Right. And then you got 15 days.
15 is like 2 weeks, and that's
Lewisboro had 3,
3 days.
that was the maximum there.
I'm checking out and
3 days and 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Huge business up there.
3 day in each bedroom.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't think Dobbs Ferry had a limit.
Well, we
Ossining,
don't want this to be a hotel. I mean, to my mind, kind of going beyond.
Ossining was 2 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why the 15.
Um,
Who's gonna wanna stay in Irvington for what, 2?
Not bad.
You?
Unless they're, unless they're.
North Salem is 15 days, so I think
it
it's
runs
around
more.
there.
Okay, so the
Maybe you're in town visiting, you're visiting family, you're not just coming to Irvington, you know,
For the breakfast.
You're,
because there's
So
a
you're,
14.
you had a baby and you're staying.
Yeah, 15 is.
I go with
15.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Why the oddball?
Because you
Because you
can't
come
play
for the weekend, you come Friday night, Saturday to Sunday.
Cheaper flights.
15 actually is, sometimes makes more sense than 14.
Plus, if you're coming from Hawaii to stay in Irvington, you wanna stay at least 15 days.
Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna be crazy.
Meal service.
Shall be limited to a morning meal served at home, because you don't want
Make it
the
a restaurant.
restaurant. Snacks and beverages are not considered meals. Does that have to be there? I mean, isn't it pretty obvious that snacks and beverages
They
are not?
sometimes have like an afternoon,
Leave it there?
they have
Yeah.
afternoon teas and
Right.
things, or, you know, wine and cheese.
Yeah, wine and
6
cheese.
o'clock.
Okay, no, I don't know, there's no issue with that.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
saying, do
just
you
saying.
think that language needs to be in there?
Well, I think we need to allow somebody.
Okay, so you don't mind the wine and cheese, okay.
Right, so it prevents someone.
Are you gonna add wine and cheese?
I'm not putting in wine and cheese, I'm just gonna say snacks
That's
and
a snack
beverages,
and
just a snack and beverage. For some people, you know, Fritos and Coke is a snack, and for other wine and cheese, it's a snack and beverage.
All the above.
Okay. Cooking facilities other than electric coffee pot are not permitted in guest rooms. In a sense, the residence in which a B&B establishment is operated shall not contain an accessory apartment.
Okay.
I saw that pretty much everywhere. I
I think that
think it
because
makes
otherwise you're
sense.
making your property
Yeah.
really a commercial
Yeah.
venture.
So things.
How about a home office?
With an aviary out back. So the question I have is,
Required period.
what was the other thing besides we had an accessory office, accessory apartment?
The other one is the in-law.
Borders of the in-law apartment.
The in-law is the other law, and then
I don't think you can, I mean, with the in-laws, you really, I don't know.
An in-law apartment is somebody who's related to the personal.
Yeah, you just gotta rent them out every 15 days, or move them to a different room.
No, I think just accessory is fine.
Okay, parking requirements, all right. No fewer than one off-street parking space shall be provided per bedroom designated as available for overnight guests. The parking shall be in addition to the parking required for the single-family dwelling. Planning board shall determine if the required number of parking spaces can be provided in a safe manner and so as not to be a nuisance or burden for residents of adjacent and surrounding lots. Off-street parking shall be suitably screened from adjacent residential properties.
And from your beehives.
Yeah, it's all sounding good to me.
Okay,
So if the owner could arrange, to take a car off and move it to Make-A-Wish, you know, that they agree that they'll take their car to another place. Is that worked into here?
Only as long as it's an adjacent property.
I mean, if you say, you know, we'll do valet parking for you, we'll take your car.
That's a planning board.
Rented space over.
well, no, right now, the planning
doesn't.
board doesn't have the flexibility to do that. It
Why?
says you have to have one off-street parking space.
But we have
Your
language
parking
like that.
requirement could be something like, you know, the planning board has to determine that there's adequate parking. I will say,
Off-street parking means it has to be on the premises? Off the street and on the premises? It doesn't mean
Off street.
that it could be at
That's what I'm-
Make-A-Wish?
Right, so an off-street parking could be some space you rent from a neighbor who doesn't use their big driveway.
yeah, you know what, I don't have my code with me, I just need to make sure that off-street parking isn't defined as on the site.
But
But that really makes sense, because
Right, but I think if the B&B owner can prove that they can provide parking.
Yeah, that the church will let them.
Right,
use
Right,
it.
that's what I mean.
That's fine.
You want the planning board to understand that that was the intention of how we were
well,
working.
they are gonna review this law, right? They'll get a copy of this law,
So
I imagine. Planning board.
oh, yes, of course, but
All right, signs, I guess the thing is, you know, I guess now, if it's like in a residential district, you can have a one
I
by
like
one
the
sign.
North,
with
the
you.
North Salem provision sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah,
one.
I thought so, because you need more than just an identification.
And you also don't want people knocking on the wrong door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Okay.
The sign out front of Allstate on Main Street has caused a lot of conniptions from certain parties. So that's kind of close to what this definition is, I think. 4 square feet, it's
And
two
is
sides.
that what the issue with it? No, this more than 4 square feet, isn't it?
No, it's a V shape though, so it's 2 panels. But there's an issue with freestanding signs and
But that's on Main Street, that's not on Broadway. We're talking about Broadway here, right?
is it all subset Broadway? Okay.
See, I could see if it were, if it had to be on the building, it could be kind of far away. I mean, you need
Especially on
people who are
Broadway.
coming there to.
If this is Broadway, then
This is on lots fronting on Broadway, that's all we're talking about.
Okay.
I agree with your comment, is it the right person? Check with Ed on J.
Oh, yeah, would the fire inspector be the person?
I have no idea.
okay, I'm back to, back. If this is a freestanding sign, it's got to be able to be double-sided. Because otherwise it doesn't do any good. Most,
That it's flat, right?
It's flat, it's gonna be.
Why would
can
why
read
would
this
it
way or
double
this way.
sided?
Because it's thinking it's perpendicular to the road.
Yeah.
Oh, perpendicular.
whether it's, I think the best visibility would be, well, it doesn't matter, but,
But this doesn't say it can't be, right?
well, but the interpretation of it can be such that
It's the size, shall not exceed 4 square feet.
it doesn't say one way or the other, but
When for
Right, it doesn't, if it doesn't preclude it,
But is 4 square feet meant to be one side and 4 square feet on the
Shall not
other side?
exceed 4 square feet per side.
per side.
agree.
Well, wait, if it's if you're printing on two sides of a 4 square feet thing, it's always gonna be 4 square feet.
But the print is 8.
It could be.
That's not how
It's
they
very
work.
innovative way to explain.
That's not how they
it.
think about
You
it in
can put
terms
it on
of
the
design.
I
back.
just did, I
Yeah,
thought 4
that-
square feet per side, I think
Yeah.
it worked.
Alright.
Yeah,
I
I think
think that
Okay.
means nothing else but that.
Okay, so I assume K and L are okay. Then I had a list of other things that I noticed in other codes that I thought I'd raise. Do you want provision that no additions to the house can be made to accommodate the bed and breakfast? I assume not. That relates to what we were discussing before. So you don't care if somebody gets onto the house, okay? Do you want to put a time limit on it?
I like 5 years.
Yeah, I like
5 years?
It usually becomes almost a rote thing, but just as a check-in place, right?
Do you care about a distance requirement? This I saw in Crow.
No.
No?
No,
If we have too many.
Oh, Broadway, yeah.
No, and actually, that, isn't it true that sometimes if you have more than one of
Yeah.
them, it's better for business for both of them?
Yeah, okay. Some codes have minimum guest room sizes.
No, it's
I don't have an opinion on that.
Yeah, but
I think I stayed in
I'm
a
minimal.
Cooperstown bed and breakfast that was smaller than 120 square
Oh,
feet.
yeah?
It was the shoe fly in, I remember that.
Okay, well. All right. Now,
Bees with it, the bees became.
um,
Way of advertising it?
That was the name of the place, the shoe fly in. And that was a small room.
okay, now in the business district. Now, one thing to be aware, in the business district, special permits aren't required for any of the businesses. So it would just be another business use permitted.
So it would have to be reviewed, right?
No?
It doesn't have to be reviewed?
No, only to the extent that the building inspector gives them, what's it, he gives them a change of use occupancy or change of use certificate or something. And when he does that, that's how I'd make sure that the things that complies with all the codes.
Oh,
So that could be a hard code to get to if you were changing from being a retail place to having rooms for individuals.
No, I don't know that it's so hard to get to, and, you know, as long as the use is permitted and your building conforms with the,
do we want a stronger review than just?
Why for
It's gonna be
B&Bs is-
reviewing parking requirements?
that's true for every whole business district.
He does now,
Well, most of them are grandfathered in.
but this wouldn't be.
Once you do a change of use, then I think it starts
Then
everything.
you have to have the
Yeah,
park.
then everything has to kick in to the current
Who does
standards.
the parking review?
That, I guess. I mean, I have, you know, to tell you the truth, the questions haven't come up, and I'm just assuming yes is probably. So uses are often kind of broad, like retail or office or whatever, and so if the use is staying the same, then, you know, if it's going from office to office, there's no increase in parking requirements. Whatever this is gonna be a new use, because the use didn't exist before.
I just feel very uncomfortable saying it's a building department reviewing parking requirements where you might have to go into negotiation about how many units you're gonna be allowed and what are the trade-offs. Just doesn't seem to me that that's something you want the building inspector involved in. That's what the body board's involved in, and I understand it's,
So you wanna make this a special permit as well?
if it means that it dovetails into the same sort of review process and keeps the building department out from, you know, weird negotiations, then I think yes.
Well, we could say that it's, I mean, right now, there are no special permits in the business district, but there's no reason there couldn't be, so.
Because then you just dovetail with the same.
So you want, does everybody agree it should be made a special permit
I'm
here?
trying to think about. I mean, the side street neighbors might be concerned that unless there's greater review that Mark is talking about, that cars would end up, you know, on the side streets and it would be not controlled enough and
We
so
don't want to be in a
I'm
situation.
kind of going in Mark's direction at the moment, but there might be a counter consideration that I'm not thinking of.
Well, one of the things I'm concerned about is oftentimes when I hear complaints about the building department, the complaints about arbitrary and capricious enforcement or arbitrary and capricious decision-making. I'm not saying that I agree with what's being said, but there's often that, and, there's insinuations that, of money exchange on the, and things like that. It's like, I've never seen that, I've never heard of it, but we don't want to do anything that furthers that kind of perception that might be possible. And I'm not saying this about, the building inspector per se, but I'm saying this about what I've heard from angry residents.
And then, and on the other hand, I mean, there's certainly, if I have to do this, I have to go for a special permit, I have to go to the planning board, I don't want to do that, it's like, why?
Don't do it.
Yeah, I know, I'm just, that's the same
As a park, as what?
No, I'm saying, unless I'm misinterpreting this, every other use in the business district has parking requirements.
Except restaurant.
Well, except restaurants, yeah,
Right.
which we know. But it doesn't involve the planning board, right?
Correct.
Well, then we can get away with it without the planning board if there's a process. But
So,
Well, related to that, and this is different, Main Street is different from Broadway in this regard. Possible that the B&B could cater to people coming by train and then they don't need the parking requirement. That's a decision I don't think Ed should make, not because I think Chet can't make it, but that would be something that you would want the planning board to review, because that looks, does it match the law or not? And I don't think he should should be burdened with determining whether it's enough parking. So that might be a reason that you would want review. I mean, I wonder if you could have the review. Well, you know what? You could have something that says that this is what the parking requirement is, and you have to have proof of so many off-street parking spaces. And if you don't, you have to go to the planning board for, approval of a different kind of parking plan.
and you
That's
might,
a little, it's a little odd, but.
because you as the owner might say, we can't accommodate a car, so you have to come by train.
Yeah, I don't know how to get that.
Yeah, somebody's gonna have a baby and say, but we can only accommodate people who come by train, and then,
Okay.
that's
possible.
I was going to say it's a T and B in that case, a train.
Well, the train is,
what they could say, we do have limited parking available, please let us know when you're making your reservation, if you're coming by car or by train, and they
Yeah, but in the meantime, you've got the right to do it.
you might say to your customer, if you bring a car, it costs you more, because they have to pay.
something like that in
the
Charleston. When we stayed at the B&B in Charleston, there was a limited space. I'm trying to remember what they made you do, and I can't remember what it was. Is they made you find your own parking?
I know
Yeah,
we
you go to
had
another
to
one.
find our own.
Yeah,
When
you
we
can
were
go
in
to one
Charleston,
somewhere or something.
we had to go on the street and told us where you.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not gonna work here. No.
But actually, what happened, the last time I was at B&B was
Moving in midnight.
down,
Was in Irvington.
no, Jersey, Pennsylvania border.
Delaware, what, okay.
Yeah.
Newbrook,
And somewhere in one of the towns,
Ivoryville.
That's the other side.
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, they had a limited number of parking permits that they were given for on-street parking, and they told us where the areas were that were relatively, you didn't have to get them at midnight to move, right? Relatively ticket-free. And so they have they gave you when you signed in, they gave you your parking pass effectively, that you hung up in the car.
Oh, there's a new trick for the parking.
Yes, let's add that to the parking. B&B.
B&B,
Yes.
B&B temporary resident parking.
Anyway, so
Are there many places you think on Main Street that would
Do it?
Yeah.
You have a parking requirement, and you don't have this use in existence, you're not gonna get any bed and breakfast on Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. The only reason that the businesses that are there are in operation is because they're grandfathered.
Because even like the yellow house.
I was gonna say, what about the yellow house?
Okay,
That's
maybe
one.
those one or
I
two.
don't think it has so many spots anyway.
Yeah, so there's a long driveway in the back, but.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a few, and a big garage.
I mean, the house that I can think of
But I
right
mean,
now.
that you're not gonna have,
Lunch.
you're not gonna have people turn existing buildings. Most of them don't have on-site parking.
But if they don't mind paying, you know, an off the church or Make-A-Wish or somewhere and having an arrangement to move a car there, seems like a viable business. What about the upper floors of the bigger buildings?
I think the burden that this use places on existing Main Street parking is, it's all off hours. It's not Tuesday noon time when everyone's trying to get lunch. The burden that it places on Main Street is weekends and evenings and you have plenty of parking. You park overnight. I don't know, it just seems like you don't need a limit. I mean, you don't need a parking requirement. But
I think it's just the side streets potentially that.
Well, let's say
It's not-
you park there, you'll
it's
get a,
just
you'll get a
That's
discount.
only on Main Street proper.
Yeah.
It's only in Main, on lots of fronting,
it might be one or two properties that are even capable of satisfying any kind of parking requirement without having the benefit of being grandfathered, which they can't because the use doesn't exist yet.
Could you make it almost you need it if you have more than a certain number of rooms, you know what I mean? Like if there's 3 rooms, you don't need it, but if you have 8, then you might.
Well, I mean, you probably want to limit, the bedroom limit on
Main
Main
Street.
Street is different than on Broadway, I think, especially if you're not gonna have a parking requirement. I
So
mean,
if you're,
you're
if
thinking,
you're presently a private owner on Main Street, you're one of the actual single-family homes, you could do this.
yeah, let's say the yellow house.
Yes, or say, any of the other ones
Well,
near
that-
the
yeah.
Historical Society or something. Could the Historical Society have 1 or 2 or
Sure.
a unit they wanted to?
Basement.
I mean, it's not the current use that determines whether you can do this. You could be a private house, or you could be a commercial venture right now.
Wait, I'm just thinking maybe this thing doesn't make sense, the provision that says the outward appearance shall be that of a one-family dwelling.
Right.
I don't think
Some of
that's-
them
That
are.
maybe doesn't make
You said
sense,
it, you said that might not be, do you care about this, right?
yeah, you care about this in the business district.
So in the business district,
Maybe that just comes out,
because
just take it out altogether.
if you're Mr. Cookies and now you want to be a bed and breakfast and not a restaurant, or
Okay.
But serving only breakfast.
Okay, the operator of the B and B shall be the owner of the premises and a full-time resident of the property. Same thing about adjacent property.
So what do we do about the parking?
Well, we get to what,
Okay, so where are we at? We're-
one of the top 4, maximum number of bedrooms. Now here, I don't think there's any place on Main Street you want to say 8, huh?
No.
well, again, I'm gonna say the yellow house.
There's a lot of bedrooms in that house.
And
What
what,
about the commercial building, the one that now has the wine store at the bottom? That whole building has, 3 floors?
we don't want a hotel. This
I
is
know,
not a
I'm just, but can that be
Well,
converted?
we can put the number 8, we can use
Yeah.
that as our guide.
And we still say that the planning board should
That's
determine
it,
a
yeah.
limited number that may be made available.
Oh, so now we're back to have the planning board reviewing this?
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
I think it should, because I think it's a unusual enough
Okay,
usage.
so let's just make it by special permit.
It does
So
probably,
it makes it easier.
it makes it easier, it makes
Gives
it
us much more
consistent.
backstop.
I think people who feel a little queasy about having these might feel better if it has a special permit.
Okay.
It's a review process.
Okay, about the same.
Everything else is
Routine
the same.
nights, meal service, cooking facilities.
Well, G is potentially,
Can
this
you
is,
have-
this
No,
is
you could
referring
have
to.
you can have an accessory apartment. I
But it
mean, you
says-
can have a building that has an accessory apartment, so that, I think that needs to be in there.
But in the other
But do we want to disallow it on Main Street is what I'm asking.
one,
Also, it says the residence in which it is established. So we're assuming, oh, it has, is that language of G correct?
yeah, no, it might not be, well. Well, if you want the provision that the accessory apartment would only be in residences, I mean, it's not gonna be in another kind of, not gonna be in a restaurant building. Do you care?
Well, come up, but.
Well, is it possible to put an accessory apartment in a building that's not a primary residence? No, right?
No, I know. But not all buildings along Main Street are residents.
I know, I understand that, but, so if we're saying, are we saying, so it's not gonna have an accessory apartment if it's not a primary residence to begin with.
Right.
So if it's one of, it's like the Yellow House where it might have an accessory apartment, do we wanna preclude that the same way we're precluding on Broadway? It seems to me it would be the same reason, that you don't want somebody turning what is primarily a single-family home into,
Multiple
Yeah.
businesses.
So I think we
into
should just leave it in there.
So just leave it in.
I just don't like the phrase the residence in
Well,
which.
we'll say any residence in which a bed and breakfast establishment is
Yeah.
operated shall not contain accessory
Okay.
apartment. Okay, so then it doesn't mean that it's
Yeah.
only in there. Okay, now the parking requirements.
I think we're disallowing this in almost every case. I mean, the few buildings I can think of that could actually be home bed and breakfast, except for the yellow one, they don't
They
have.
don't have driveways.
Well, what about if this is where we have the planning board shall determine, remember we just put that in another law, I think for the home occupation law,
That's
that the planning board shall determine if there's adequate parking,
I
that
think
it won't be
I
a
think that's
burden on the
fine.
neighborhood.
Yes,
or
I
whatever.
I think on Broadway, you can make a black and white case. For here, it's gonna be,
Because you can't park on the street. So
Yeah,
you need to have
exactly.
parking.
So leave two.
I would leave little Roman 2 in there, right, but change this to the planning board shall determine. I think that was in the home occupation.
Does it say something about mass transit though here? Can we say
Well,
something?
this is where the planning board has to realize that if the person says, you know, we're gonna have some of our guests are
on
gonna.
North Astor Street.
Wait, but how do you know though, I mean, Mark, how do you?
Or maybe the planning board can consider the use, but you can't,
No,
even if somebody could walk from the train station, you're still gonna have people who are coming cars. It's just.
yeah, I know.
But
Who's gonna
don't
leave
you-
their
don't you-
suitcases up the hill? We need a jitney.
That's next week's, that's the next
I mean, if you had very good enforcement of the side street laws, then those people, it's like when you go to Charleston or somewhere, you know that you come there, you've gotta find somewhere else to park, because you're told if you park here, you're gonna get a $30 ticket, if you've gotta find a place, and,
Yeah.
I just don't wanna make it so stringent that no one's gonna open a bed and
right,
breakfast.
exactly, that's what I'm saying, you know, that you explain the situation, and
But
Yeah, but on the other hand, you can't increase, you can't
No, I think
make
that's
more of a
utilities
burden, but I think, no, it's not 2, it's, I'm gonna put another 1. I'm gonna add something that the planning board shall determine that, you know.
Parking requirement is.
Right.
Yeah, adequate parking shall be available for the home occupation, so there will not result in insufficient parking for neighboring residents. The planning board shall determine whether off-street parking spaces are necessary, and if so, the number of spaces that must be provided, their location on the lot, and the screening that must be provided.
that's good. All right, who wrote that?
I was gonna do Hastings Law.
Okay,
And then the signs, what do you think for signs down
Historical
there?
district. Historical district signs.
Okay.
I'm sorry, wait, you said,
Historic district requirements.
oh, for the signs, okay. That makes sense.
You're not having as much trouble finding, where you're going on Main Street. I mean, as you would be driving along Broadway. I think you find your bed and breakfast easier.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay, well, we'll just look at the sidewalk.
Speed limit sign.
Okay, so that,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, everyone's going slow now, so this coming out polite.
Well, it's
Oh,
also
Brenda's
around
still on
the
this.
corner, too.
And she
But
had
wait, I don't
There's
think,
very few
I
choices.
think we have some other things.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Try something else.
But I will make a motion to adjourn.
Hey, you said yes.
Second,
Second, please, third,
second,
please,
second.
quadruple.
Vote.
All in favor?
Yes.
But we have more to
Yeah.